Chapter 137. Lord Daoist Jinghe's Immortal's cave was called Shangqing Palace. When Mo Tiange saw it, she was surprised. She thought it would be called Myriad Flowers Palace or 100 Fragrances Palace or something like that. She didn't expect it to be called such a normal name. In this palace, aside from Lord Daoist Jinghe, there were only her and 16 maids. These maids were all foundation-building female cultivators in the school. Their spiritual roots were ordinary, so they weren't qualified to be accepted by core formation cultivators. Therefore, they volunteered to be the maids of a nascent soul grandmaster, hoping to get some pointers. Lord Daoist Jinghe wasn't a stingy person. As his maids, they could indeed often get pointers and rewards from him. In the beginning, these maids might really have come for the advancement of their cultivation levels. However, they had been serving a man for a long time. This man had a high cultivation level, a good appearance, and a good demeanor, so they unwittingly became delusional and jealous. During her days in Wenyang Pond, Mo Tiange was used to seeing Mei, Lan, Zhu, and Chrysanthemum bickering, so she didn't think much of it. Now that she was in Shangqing Palace, she realized that bickering among them was really nothing. These 16 maids were named Mei, Lan, Zhu, Ju, Qin, Qi, Hua, Chun, Xia, Qiu, Dong, Yu, Shui, Feng, Shuang. The names were all given by Lord Daoist Jinghe, so they were extremely cliché. According to the standard of these names, this Immortal's cave was actually called Shangqing Palace, which really surprised Mo Tiange. Her Mingxin residence was relatively close to the residences of Qin, Qi, Hua, and Xiuqin. These 4 maids were called Xiuqin, Qingqi, Xianshu, and Daihua. These names were a bit more elegant than Mei, Lan, Zhu, and Ju, but the way they interacted with each other was even worse than Mei, Lan, Zhu, and Ju. Moreover, because her cultivation level was almost the same as theirs, these maids didn't serve her sincerely. Although they called her martial uncle and never disobeyed her, their speech and behavior gradually lost respect. So far, Mo Tiange laid a 5-spirit formation around her small cave and only told them to send summoning talismans outside the cave to minimize the chance of contact. Since she blocked these maids outside the cave and Lord Daoist Jinghe left her to fend for herself, Mo Tiange was finally able to enter the virtual sky world and continue her cultivation. With the Sunu art of the origin, her cultivation progress was extremely fast. She only needed to cultivate for 6 hours a day, and she would be able to achieve the same results as before. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange wasn't in a hurry to cultivate. Every day, she would cultivate for 6 hours. Once she achieved the same results as before, she would stop. That was because she knew her cultivation level was forcibly raised to the middle stage of the foundation-building realm, so her temperament and realm weren't stable yet. If she impatiently sought quick results, her temperament wouldn't be enough when the time came and she would most likely fail to form her gold core. She would have to turn back and continue on this path, so it was better to walk slowly now and firmly lay a solid foundation. Because she had forcibly suppressed her cultivation speed, she had also slowed down the pace of her soul-refining art. Any art used in fights of magical power had to be based on mental cultivation techniques, and the soul-refining art was the same. She was only in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm now. Although her primordial spirit and meridians were different from those of ordinary foundation-building cultivators, she couldn't ignore her cultivation level. If her cultivation level wasn't high enough, the soul-refining art would eventually backfire on her. Therefore, Mo Tiange devoted the remaining 12 hours to other skills. Array formations, alchemy, weapon forging, talisman crafting, medicine, and mechanisms. The so-called mechanism technique was one of the more unique techniques. According to legend, in the distant ancient times, the school of Mo once appeared in the human world. Their grandmaster, Moz, was skilled in craftsmanship and could use wood, fine iron, and other materials to create extremely powerful mechanisms. One of them could fight against 100 enemies, and they could even attack cities and plunder lands. In the immortal cultivation world, this was naturally a small skill that was not worth mentioning. However, the immortal cultivation world also had its own mechanism technique. Puppets made from various spiritual objects and crystals could also obtain the same power as human cultivators. Unfortunately, after Mo Tiange flipped through the books on mechanism technique, she found these puppets needed something called crystals to be activated. Now that crystals couldn't be found, it was no wonder the mechanism technique was also lost. Cultivating, farming, and practicing skills. The days passed by just like that. Mo Tiange holed up in this small immortal's cave, but the more she learned, the more fascinated she became. She didn't even see other people. She didn't know how much time had passed in this kind of lonely but not lonely life, but her nominal master finally remembered her. Mo Tiange sat on the chair, still looking down and letting Lord Daoist Jinghe examine her without raising her eyes. Lord Daoist Jinghe stared at her for a while and finally said, "Girl, you're quite smart. You actually didn't cultivate desperately and slowed down your cultivation pace. You're much smarter than that stinky brat." Stinky brat? Mo Tiange's mind raced. Who is he talking about? After saying that, Lord Daoist Jinghe lay down again. You deliberately suppress your cultivation speed every day. Are you very idle? She wasn't idle at all. But Mo Tiange didn't dare to say this directly, so she just nodded and looked at her nominal master very carefully. Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't care. He didn't even look at her and continued to peel grapes with his spiritual power. How about master give you something to do? This is considered an errand? Mo Tiange looked at him even more carefully. Lord Daoist Jinghe glanced at her, chuckled, and said cordially, "Disciple, master is thinking about you. Look at you. You still have more than 9 years to live. Locking yourself up like this doesn't seem good, does it?" "Master," Mo Tiange said thoughtfully, "disciple thinks it's very good. I like this kind of life very much." Lord Daoist Jinghe raised his eyebrows. "How is it very good? You don't need to be embarrassed. Master has already thought about it for you. I'm guessing you don't cultivate more than 10 hours every day, right? There are 24 hours in a day, and there's still half of it left. You don't need to sleep, so why are you idle? Therefore, master thought of a way for you. I'll give you something to do." Seeing that Mo Tiange didn't object, Lord Daoist Jinghe immediately smiled. "You're so obedient. Do you think master will harm you? I'm telling you, aside from cultivation, there are some things that are also very important. Master won't harm you." Mo Tiange sighed. "Master, if you have something to say, please say it directly." Lord Daoist Jinghe immediately took out a jade slip. "You just need to follow what's written on this and finish your tasks at a fixed time every day." Mo Tiange doubtfully sank her divine sense into the jade slip. She suddenly wanted to vomit blood. Collect dew at the Yin hour, take care of spiritual plants at the Mao hour, take care of spiritual beasts at the Chen hour, go out to preach Dao at the Si hour, and return at noon. Out of the remaining 14 hours, 10 hours were arranged, and most of them were done by his maids. What does this master want to do? Does he want me to run around in circles every day? Master. Mo Tiange's expression was a bit dark. Aren't these tasks a bit too much? Too much. Lord Daoist Jinghe said, back then, when Xianyin, Qingyuan, and those brats just entered the sect, they did a lot of things, but you didn't do much. Fine, disciples have the duty to serve their masters, but the problem was that masters also have the duty to teach disciples. This master never taught her, so why should she fulfill her duty as a disciple? Seeing that she didn't speak, Lord Daoist Jinghe blew his beard and glared at her. Is there a disciple like you? I ask you to do something, yet you're so reluctant. Back then, Xianyin and the others. All right, Mo Tiange said helplessly, I'll do whatever master says. Disciple will just do as you say. That's more like it. She braced herself and agreed to Lord Daoist Jinghe's orders. In fact, she had no choice but to agree. Did she dare to disobey a nascent soul cultivator? But what made her even more depressed was that even though she was already in a bad mood, the maids she took over were still giving her bad looks. The maid who previously did the dew collecting task threw her the jade bottle containing the dew and the jade stick containing the dew. Her expression was cold and full of disdain. Grandmaster likes the dew before 2:45 in the morning. If it's a little later, he won't want it. In addition, they must have fragrant and clean spiritual plants. If there's a strange smell, Grandmaster will definitely fly into a rage. You do as you see fit. Mo Tienga took them, but she didn't feel like thanking her. She just turned around and left. However, she heard the two maids behind her talking loudly. Mingxia, your task has been taken over by others. What are you doing? The maid who dealt with Mo Tienga a moment ago said in a mocking tone, Grandmaster has already spoken, what can I do? If there's nothing to do, then there's nothing to do. I can even have more time to cultivate. She's a disciple and we're maids. Why did she come to steal our task? Why don't you think about what kind of person our Grandmaster is? In any case, he's a middle-stage nascent soul cultivator. Even if a core formation cultivator kneels and begs him, he'll definitely accept her as his disciple, let alone a small foundation-building cultivator. So what if she has the title of disciple? She's still the same as us. You're right. I heard Grandmaster accepted her as his disciple because he had a conflict with another cultivation group. It was just an expedient measure. Some people don't really think they've reached the sky in a single bound. Hey, don't say it like that. A disciple is a disciple, but we're maids. If we offend her, maybe Grandmaster won't want to give us guidance anymore. By the way, Grandmaster said he's going to preach Tao to us today, right? Yes, let's not be late. Mo Tienga clenched her teeth, pretending not to see or hear. What's the point of gossip? It's not like I'll lose a piece of flesh. He actually preached Tao to maids, but he didn't give her any guidance, let alone give her a master-disciple gift. After picking the dew at 2:45 in the morning, Mo Tienga rushed back to Xianxia Palace and took over the job of taking care of the spiritual plants. This time, the ones who handed over the task were Weiyu and Qingxue of the Rain, Snow, Wind, and Frost sect. The two of them were rather straightforward. They just threw her a jade slip that classified spiritual plants, then turned around and ignored her. It took Mo Tienga almost an hour to clearly understand how to handle the various spiritual plants, but the two maids were still mocking and ridiculing her on the side. Qingxue, this hairpin of yours is pretty good. Is it a magic tool? This was bestowed to me by Grandmaster a few days ago. Master said my skin is fair, so I look the most beautiful with this fragrant green snow hairpin. If I encounter a fight of magical power, I can use it to protect myself. I also received a reward. Look at this ribbon. Grandmaster said girls should be beautiful to be pleasing to the eye. Wearing a gray sect uniform without even a hairpin on her head is too uncouth. Isn't that right? Last time when we went to Mount Tianhua, Grandmaster saw Senior Martial Sister Zhan from Seoul's Retreat Peak and bestowed her clothes. As maids, we have to serve Grandmaster every day, so we have to dress even more beautifully. But it's really strange. It's not like Grandmaster hasn't accepted any female disciples. Martial Uncle Sushin is also extraordinarily beautiful, so why did he accept a completely unremarkable one now? That depends on whether she can dress herself up or not. Say, she looks like that, what else can Grandmaster do? You're right. The two maids covered their mouths and giggled. Mo Tienga numbly finished pruning the branches, catching the insects, watering the plants, closing the restrictions on the medicinal garden, and leaving. When it was 7 in the morning and the sky was bright, she went to the back of the mountain behind the cave. Wearing a dusty sect uniform? Not even a hairpin on her head? Just like that? Mo Tienga let out a snort. The sect uniform of foundation-building cultivators was blue with white sleeves. How was it gray? Elite disciples like Han Qingyu, Luo Fengxue, and Yi Jingwen all dressed like that. Even senior martial brother Xianin and the others also dressed like that. Hairpin? She was combed into a Daoist bun right now, so why would she need a hairpin? Senior martial sister Sushin was also plain and clean. She even said she looked like that. Even if she didn't say she was as beautiful as a fairy, at least she was much better than them. Mo Tienga angrily walked to the spiritual beast courtyard at the back of the mountain. This time, Qin, Qi, Shu, and Hua were waiting for her. As a nascent soul cultivator, Lord Daoist Jinghe had many spiritual beasts. This courtyard was full of spiritual beasts ranging from the 2nd rank to the 6th rank. Reportedly, he took care of the spiritual beasts with higher ranks. But the spiritual beasts above the 5th rank were equivalent to the core formation realm. They were only in the foundation building realm, so the 4 of them took care of them together to avoid any accidents. Martial Uncle Mo, Grandmaster must have given you the Spiritual Beast Institute's restriction tablets a long time ago. We only have some specific methods to use them, so we'll give them to you for reference. As Xiuqin spoke, she passed a jade slip to Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange calmed down a little. Finally, this group of people didn't anger her. She didn't notice that Xinshu's eyes shifted and she glanced at Daihua. The 4 maids understood tacitly, but they just stared at Mo Tiange without saying anything. Mo Tiange took the jade slip and quickly finished reading it. After all, spiritual beasts weren't spiritual plants that could be planted casually. There were only a dozen kinds of spiritual beasts in the entire spiritual beast courtyard. After she finished reading the jade slip, she went to prepare all kinds of fodder. Soon after, she used the identity tablet Lord Daoist Jinghe gave her to open the restriction at the entrance of the spiritual beast courtyard. 3 2nd-rank spiritual beasts, 3 3rd-rank spiritual beasts, 1 4th-rank spiritual beast, 2 5th-rank spiritual beasts, and 1 6th-rank spiritual beast. She put the fodder in order until she reached the 5th-rank spiritual beast. This was a 5th-rank sky-treading bull. It had huge horns and was said to have the power to step on the sky and split the earth. Mo Tiange followed the instructions on the jade slip, opened the outermost restriction and put the fodder down. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, the restriction on the inner layers suddenly flashed. In an instant, the sky-treading bull moved towards the sky. Its hind hooves rubbed against the ground and bumped into the restriction. With a flash, the restriction disappeared. When Mo Tiange heard this sound, she turned around halfway and suddenly saw the bull's horn rushing towards her. She immediately summoned the white silk handkerchief and a brick wall fell down, firmly blocking the force of the bull's horn. Soon after, she reached out to grab the white silk handkerchief that had returned to its original state. She then carried herself and ran outside. On the way, she glared fiercely at Qin, Qi, Shu, Hua, who were standing at the edge of the courtyard. These 4 people didn't ridicule her because they already planned to teach her a lesson like this. But she didn't have much time to think about it now. The sky-treading bull was chasing after her, dashing left and right, but its horn was always aimed at her. Mo Tiange had already used the white silk handkerchief to avoid the 5th-rank demonic beast's attack a long time ago. Now that she could control it more easily, she wasn't in a hurry. The sky-treading bull's power lay in its strength, but its speed wasn't very good. She used the white silk handkerchief with all her strength, so it wasn't easy to hide. However, it was also difficult to catch it. Of course, she could also run ahead with the bull and ask Lord Daoist Jinghe for help, but wouldn't that make her look very incompetent? Mo Tiange hastily retreated and a lamp appeared in her hand. The lamp flew high and shone brightly. Mo Tiange pointed with her spiritual aura and the light shone on the sky-treading bull's body. The sky-treading bull slowed down a bit. At that moment, Mo Tiange threw out several formation discs and spirit stones. Disorienting formation. The enchanting lantern, which she had never used before, was paired with the disorienting formation. In an instant, the sky-treading bull was at a loss. Its spiritual aura was indeed powerful, so the enchanting lantern and disorienting formation could only block it for a while. However, this short moment was already enough for Mo Tiange. Spiritual beasts also had divine senses. In the disorienting formation, spiritual beasts would instinctively use their divine senses to sense their surroundings, giving Mo Tiange a chance to take advantage of. Using the soul-refining art, she controlled her divine sense and ruthlessly lashed it. The sky-treading bull moved and violently jumped up. The white silk handkerchief attacked again, but this time, it wasn't for protection. Instead, it ruthlessly smashed the sky-treading bull with a brick wall. Upon seeing the sky-treading bull falling to the ground, Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. She didn't have a powerful enough offensive magic tool. Only the white silk handkerchief, a magic weapon, could possibly injure the sky-treading bull. Coupled with the soul-refining art's unexpected attack, she was able to temporarily immobilize the sky-treading bull. Imo locked the sky-treading bull back into the spiritual beast compound, opened all the restrictions, then walked out of the compound. She coldly stared at Qin, Qi, Shu, Hua, who had been standing on the side from the beginning. She clearly saw that when the sky-treading bull rushed out, smiles appeared on these four people's faces. They were obviously ready to scheme against her. If she didn't have the soul-refining art and several treasures on her, as well as the several restrictions here that limited the sky-treading bull's power, she would have most likely lost half her life just now. Right now, when these four people looked at her, the mocking expressions on their faces were no longer there. Instead, they were replaced with terror. From the moment the sky-treading bull broke through the restrictions to when Mo Tiange knocked it out, only a few breaths had passed. A middle-stage foundation-building cultivator was actually able to subdue a fifth-rank spiritual beast. Although it was also because the restrictions in this place limited the sky-treading bull's power, it was still enough to shock them. They were just unconvinced, so they wanted to borrow the power of the fifth-rank spiritual beast to teach this martial uncle, who was also a foundation-building cultivator but was looked upon favorably by Grandmaster, a lesson. There were restrictions here, and the four of them were ready to attack at any time, so presumably, they wouldn't take her life. However, it was very possible that she would lose half her life. They weren't afraid of Grandmaster's anger because Grandmaster didn't like people who didn't have abilities. As long as they kept her alive, Grandmaster wouldn't blame them. But they never expected that a fifth-rank spiritual beast would actually be subdued in just a few breaths' time. Mo Tiange sneered. She held the white silk handkerchief in one hand and the shuttle of flying Apsara in the other. It seems you're very unconvinced. In that case, let's fight. All of you, come at me together. I'll let you know why I'm a disciple and you're my maids. Qin, Qi, Shu, and Hua originally had frightened expressions on their faces, but when they heard what she said, they looked at each other with anger in their eyes. That's right. They were unconvinced. Their aptitudes were a bit inferior, but their cultivation levels weren't weak. There were also middle-stage foundation-building cultivators among them, so why did they have to call a cultivator in the same realm as the martial uncle? Why did Grandmaster value her so much and make her familiar with everything in Xianxia Palace? Junior martial sisters, since martial uncle said so, let's play with her. Chapter 138. Except for Xiuqin, who was in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm, the other maids were all in the early stage. Their aptitudes were average and they didn't have a strong backer, so they were already very lucky to be able to advance to the foundation-building realm. Even with the guidance of a nascent soul cultivator, only a few of them could advance to the middle stage. But in any case, they'd been serving nascent soul grandmasters for a long time, so they'd seen a lot of big scenes. Mo Tiange's disregard for them immediately aroused their anger. Once Xiuqin finished speaking, Qingqi took out her magic tool while Xianshu and Daihua took out their flying magic tools and chose their positions. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. Based on their positions, they had some knowledge of fights of magical powers and weren't idiots. But so what if they weren't idiots? 4 foundation-building cultivators and female cultivators with no experience in fights of magical powers, they weren't worthy of her attention. The 4 of them stood in their positions but didn't attack immediately. They seemed to be waiting for her. Mo Tiange smiled and raised her left hand. The shuttle of flying Apsara rushed towards Xiuqin while she stepped on the white silk handkerchief and instantly flew away from her original position. Seeing her attack, Qin, Qi, Shu, and Hua each took out their magic tools. Some were flower baskets, some were ribbons. In short, they were all beautiful things that women liked. Although Mo Tiange didn't take them seriously, she had a good habit. No matter who her opponent was, once they started fighting, she would treat them with caution. The shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a golden light and enveloped Xiuqin. Xiuqin raised a Rui Jade, which emitted light and blocked the attack. At the same time, the other 3 people used their own methods to attack. Mo Tiange didn't even look at them. She waved her hand and retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara, instantly changing her position. With this move, Tiange had a rough idea of the situation. The four people's magic tools were good, but they didn't have much experience in fighting. Presumably, they didn't need to fight when they followed Lord Daoist Jinghe. Moreover, female cultivators didn't like fighting, so their knowledge of fights of magical powers probably came from Lord Daoist Jinghe's explanations. This made things a lot easier. Ever since Tiange entered Kunwu, she'd experienced countless life and death battles. At first, she followed second uncle, but later, she fought on her own. The dangers she went through were beyond these four people's imagination. Battles of magical powers did not only rely on cultivation and magic tools. Sometimes, in the face of life and death, one could even rely on a flash of intuition. This was the accumulation of countless experiences. Opponents without experience were the easiest to deal with, because even if they knew what they should do at this time, they often couldn't do it. After a series of probing attacks, Tiange released the enchanting lantern. If an experienced cultivator saw the sky-treading bull's reaction after she took out this lamp, they would know it was a hallucination-type magic weapon, and they would just retreat a certain distance away from it. Therefore, this kind of magic weapon had very little use against cultivators who were good at fights of magical powers. However, these four people didn't notice it at all. They were still focused on their own magic weapons. The enchanting lantern flew up and shone brightly. Tiange condensed her aura on her fingers and guided the light to shine down slowly. Qin, Qi, Shu, Hua and Hua immediately felt their vision darken and the surrounding scenery disappeared. They were at a loss of what to do. Suddenly, a golden light appeared above Xianxu's head, instantly covering her. Ah! Hearing their companions scream, the other three were shocked. Xiuqin was even more flustered. She shouted, "You dare to kill them?" What answered her was Qingqi's scream. Qingqi was fighting with a flying sword. Her flower basket had the upper hand, so she was feeling proud of herself when several flying needles silently appeared beside her and shot into her body. Next was Daihua. It was still the shuttle of flying Apsara that dealt with Daihua, but this time, it formed a square formation and trapped Daihua inside. Martial Uncle Mo. Hearing her junior martial sister's screams one after another, Xiuqin couldn't help but shout, "Even if you're Grandmaster's disciple, killing people is too much." Right after she said that, her eyes suddenly lit up. Tiange, who was flying in the air, smiled coldly. "Too much? You also know I'm Master's disciple, so why do you want to take my life?" Seeing her smile, Xiuqin felt cold, but she still answered, "We sisters don't want to take Martial Uncle's life. We just want to teach me a lesson, right?" Tiange flung her sleeves. A seemingly substantial spiritual aura flew out and hit Qingqi, Xianxu and Daihua, who were lying on the ground. The three of them let out muffled screams, but they didn't die. Xiuqin shouted, "Martial Uncle?" Her voice was filled with fear and anger. She was scared because if something happened to the three of them, she, as the leader of the four, would definitely have to take responsibility. She was angry because Tiange didn't even care that they were Grandmaster's maids. Tiange was unmoved. She just glanced at her contemptuously, then turned around and entered the Spiritual Beasts Institute. "I can't act spoiled, but you can't fight. That's all you've got? Don't be an eyesore in front of me in the future." Tiange's words were very rude, but Xiuqin didn't dare to say a word. Ever since she became Grandmaster's maid, no one had ever dared to treat her so rudely. Even those core formation martial uncles were polite to her out of respect for Grandmaster. It was precisely this politeness that made her think she had some status. Now that this martial uncle taught them a lesson without the slightest politeness, she finally realized that a maid would always be a maid. She carefully checked every restriction, put food and water in place, cleaned every spiritual beast room, and finally left the Spiritual Beasts Institute. Qin, Qi, Shu, Hua, and Qin were no longer here, so they must have learned their lesson. The corners of Tiange's lips curled up, thinking mockingly. Sure enough, this world couldn't tolerate people always being humble and small. If you endured, you'd be bullied instead. Only by being strong and suppressing others could you gain some respect. In Yunwu sect, She had no background, no backer, and no cultivation level, so she had to restrain herself. Now that she was at Xianxia school, she was a nascent Soul Grandmaster's advanced inner disciple and had a certain level of strength, so why should she be excessively patient? After teaching them a lesson today, those 4 women should know their place. If the others also provoked her, she'd give them a good beating. It was time to go out and give a sermon. Tiange was a bit worried when she saw what she had to do next. According to reason, as a middle-stage foundation-building cultivator, she could indeed give sermons to aura-refining disciples. However, she cultivated the path of the origin, which was completely different from the Tao of today. How could she give her sermons to Xianxia school's disciples? Even if she did, wouldn't it be useless to those disciples? With this question in mind, she ran to the main hall of Xianxia Palace. As soon as she stepped into the main hall, she saw Qin, Qi, Hua, and Qin kneeling in front of Lord Daoist Jinghe with an excited expression. What's going on? Tiange was completely puzzled. She walked forward and saluted. Master! Ha, little disciple, come here quickly. Tiange silently ignored Lord Daoist Jinghe's overly excited smile and walked towards him. Lord Daoist Jinghe called her over, but he ignored her again and turned to Qin, Qi, Hua, and Hua. How badly did she beat you? Upon hearing this, Tiange finally understood. As it turned out, those 4 women came to complain. However, judging from Lord Daoist Jinghe's expression, their complaint wasn't very successful. The one who spoke was Xianxia. She cautiously looked at Tiange and answered, except for senior martial sister Xiuqin, martial uncle knocked all of us unconscious. Her words weren't exaggerated, but her expression was delicate and pitiful. After she finished speaking, she glared at Tiange with resentment before lowering her head. Tiange was speechless. She wasn't a man, so what was the use of acting in front of her? Little did they know that Xianxia did this out of habit. Probably because Lord Daoist Jinghe liked the coquettish side of women, maids like them would act like little women from time to time in order to please their grandmaster to win his favor. But this time, not only did Tiange ignore them, but Lord Daoist Jinghe also didn't look at her. He laughed and patted Tiange's shoulder. Not bad. This is my, Qin Jinghe's, disciple. If you dare to be disobedient, won't you be obedient after a beating? Dilly-dallying and chattering, aren't you annoying? Tiange listened to Lord Daoist Jinghe's praise, but her eyebrows didn't even twitch. She dared to make a move because she was sure this nominal master of hers wouldn't make things difficult for her for the sake of maids. Besides, maids were maids in the end, and she was his disciple. She didn't need to act like little girls to please him. As long as her behavior was pleasing to his eyes and her cultivation level advanced quickly, he'd naturally protect her. With this master's flamboyant and murderous nature, how could she, his disciple, be weak? However, these maids all looked very smart, so why did they also come to complain about something so boring? This was because she thought too highly of these maids. Because Tiange deliberately held back, Xiuqin naturally didn't dare to say anything after witnessing Tiange's methods. The other 3, on the other hand, had developed an arrogant temperament under Lord Daoist Jinghe's wing, so how could they swallow this insult? However, reality made them very depressed. Judging from Grandmaster's reaction, not only did he not blame this martial uncle but he even seemed to admire her very much. Lord Daoist Jinghe ignored the maid's embarrassed looks and raised his chin at Tiange in a very good mood. Girl, you're not bad. This lord is in a good mood today, so I'll reward you with something. Just treat it as a gift from the other day when I took you as my disciple. Take out all your magic tools and whatnot. Let me see what you lack. Tiange's heart was filled with joy when she heard what he said. Medicinal pills and cultivation techniques were fine since she didn't lack them at all. As for magic tools and whatnot, she also felt she had too few means of attack. She promptly took out all the magic tools and magic weapons she used in fights of magical powers. The white silk handkerchief, the enchanting lantern, the shuttle of flying Apsara, the land-fleeing ruler, the flying needle, and the flying sword senior martial brother Xianin gave her when she built her foundation that day. Tiange thought for a while then said, Master, I still have the heaven and earth cloud silk armor and the spirit concealing pendant. I don't need these, do I? Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't answer and just stared at the things on the table. He first picked up the flying sword and looked at it. It was a very common weapon for foundation-building disciples. The flying needle was a good thing, a good weapon for sneak attacks. Soon after, he saw the land-fleeing ruler and the shuttle of flying Apsara, and his brows furrowed. That stinky brat. Although the land-fleeing ruler wasn't refined by him, there were still traces of him refining it. Also, this shuttle of flying Apsara was clearly something he bestowed upon him after he built his foundation. It turned out he'd long since given it to this girl. Finally, when he saw the enchanting lantern and the white silk handkerchief, Lord Daoist Jinghe's brows became tighter and tighter until they were almost vertical. This lantern was fine since it wasn't very useful, but this handkerchief? He didn't know what material it was made of, but he actually couldn't tell. Putting the things back, Lord Daoist Jinghe shouted, "For magic tools, 2 magic weapons, and the armor you mentioned just now, you still think it's not enough? Don't you know most foundation-building cultivators only have 1 or 2 magic tools? You have magic weapons, but you're still not satisfied. Take them all back, I won't give them to you. A man who is never content is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant." As he spoke, he even turned around and flung his sleeves. Tiange was dumbfounded. She already knew this master of hers wasn't like other nascent soul cultivators who pretended to be mysterious and had a temperamental temperament, but wasn't this too exaggerated? He was obviously the one who wanted to reward her, so how did it become her being insatiable in the end? It wasn't her who asked for it. Lord Daoist Jinghe gave her a sidelong glance. "Why are you still standing there like a fool? Quickly go and do your thing." Tiange clenched her teeth and swallowed her anger. She put away the things, then turned around and walked away. Halfway there, she suddenly stopped, turned around, and asked, "Master, disciple wanted to ask, disciple isn't qualified to preach Tao, right?" Lord Daoist Jinghe shouted again, "You're not qualified? You're my disciple, but you actually said you're not qualified to preach Tao to aura-refining cultivators? You must be joking." Disciple now practices the art of the origin, which is different from their Tao. What does it have to do with being different? They won't divide it among themselves. If they tell you to go, just go. Yes, disciple will take her leave. Tiange rubbed her head, walked out of Xianxia Palace, and silently asked the heavens, "What kind of sin did I commit to have such a master? He doesn't give me pointers, doesn't reward me, and is temperamental and emotional. Having him is equivalent to not having him. Preach Tao, preach Tao." While muttering these words, Tiange went to the steward's hall. "Marshal, Uncle Emo," the one who received her was Luo Fengxue, who was still a bit unaccustomed to calling her that. Tiange saw her expression and understood tacitly. She then followed her into the hall. Since there was no one else there, Luo Fengxue changed the way she addressed her. "Tiange, what brings you here?" Tiange smiled bitterly. "Master arranged for me to preach Tao." "Oh." Luo Fengxue suddenly understood. "You're in the foundation building realm now, so it's not strange for him to arrange for you to preach Tao. That being said, I've never preached Tao, that doesn't matter." Luo Fengxue said, "Since you've built your foundation, you naturally have more experience than aura-refining disciples, so you can preach anything you want. What did Grandmaster say?" "Master told me to preach Tao every day for 4 hours. Huh. Upon hearing this arrangement, Luo Fengxue was puzzled. What's Grandmaster thinking? Our Xianxia school already gives Tao preaching to disciples frequently, once every 3 days. Even if you preach Tao every day, you won't have a place to do it. This was also the reason why Tiange felt Lord Daoist Jinghe was deliberately tormenting her. For hours every day? Could it be that he would take all the Tao preaching at Xianxia school on his own? But Luo Fengshue's tone changed. "If you think it's too troublesome, I can arrange for you to teach new disciples. That way, it'll be easy and you can report to the higher-ups." Tiange thought about it and felt this seemed right, so she smiled and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you. I can't refuse Master's arrangement. Right now, I'm having a headache about how to report to the higher-ups. Luo Fengxue smiled and walked to the table. She took out a blank jade slip, wrote something on it, and gave it to Mo Tiange. If you want to preach Dao to all aura-refining disciples and have to go to the main peak, you can't teach new disciples. Just take this to Mengxue Hall on the mountainside. Someone will receive you there. Finally, Luo Fengxue satisfied her for once. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. She took the jade slip and went to the mountainside according to Luo Fengxue's instructions. Xianxia School had 3 ways of accepting disciples. One of them was the same as other big cultivation groups. Every 10 years, the school would open its gates and select individual cultivators from various clans with excellent spiritual roots or strong abilities. The other way was like Mo Tiange, which was recommended by cultivators in the foundation building realm and above. However, she was actually brought into the school by a core formation cultivator, so she didn't have to pass the test. The last way was to find mortals with outstanding spiritual roots from the secular world and bring them into the school. The last type of disciples usually had outstanding spiritual roots and were accepted by core formation cultivators as soon as they entered the school. Luo Fengxue was one of them. In the past, her elder brother also worshipped Master Daoist Xianxia as his master. After he failed in his realm breakthrough and died, Master Daoist Xianxia took care of his disciples' funeral affairs and went to the secular world. He happened to find that Luo Fengxue also had spiritual roots, so he brought her back to the school and accepted her as his disciple. Apart from the third type of disciples who were directly accepted by high-level cultivators, the other 2 types of disciples had to start at Mengxue Hall if they were in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm or below. Therefore, Mengxue Hall was divided into 2 types of disciples. The first type was children with 3 spiritual roots or above. They were accepted because their aptitudes were high enough, so there were no requirements for their cultivation levels. The second type was disciples with poor aptitudes but still had potential. These disciples were usually the descendants of cultivators in the school, so the requirements were relaxed. When Mo Tiange arrived at Mengxue Hall, the cultivator in charge was very respectful when he saw her. "Grandmaster Mo, I didn't expect you to grace us with your presence. Please forgive my rudeness." Grandmaster? Mo Tiange trembled when she heard this title. The person in charge of Mengxue Hall was naturally a foundation-building cultivator, but the people who usually did things were all aura-refining disciples. She was now the advanced inner disciple of a nascent soul grandmaster, so her seniority was equivalent to a core formation grandmaster, so there was no problem with this title. However, it hadn't been long since she advanced to the foundation-building realm. Originally, she was just an insignificant aura-refining cultivator like these people, but all of a sudden, she became a grandmaster. The contrast was too big. Moreover, the one who addressed her like this was a white-haired old man, so it was even more difficult for her to adapt. "No need to be so polite. The reason I came here is clearly written in this jade slip. If there's anything you need me to do, just tell me." This aura-refining cultivator who was nearing the end of his lifespan and had no hope of advancing to the next realm didn't dare to be rude to her in the slightest. He still bowed and said, "Martial Uncle Luo explained in the jade slip that Grandmaster came here to teach the new disciples of Mengxue Hall. However, Martial Uncle Luo probably doesn't know that all the new disciples of Mengxue Hall have teachers who are directly responsible for teaching them. I'm afraid." "Is that so?" Mo Tiange was stunned. "Then just find me something to do." Mo Tiange was a bit annoyed that the old man was still hesitating when she said anything. "Are you saying that I can't do anything here?" The old man repeatedly shook his head. I don't dare. Grandmaster, I'll tell you the truth. The highest cultivation level among us is only in the 9th layer of the aura refining realm. You can teach us directly, so why do you need to give sermons to the new disciples? Does this mean my cultivation level is too high and I'm being disliked? Mo Tiange resisted the urge to roll her eyes. She just wanted to muddle through this period of time. Why didn't this old man understand? I said anything. Do you understand? If there's nothing else, just let me sweep the floor, okay? I don't dare to trouble Grandmaster. Xianxia felt helpless. Then I won't do anything. I'll just sit here for 4 hours, okay? Chapter 139. The cultivators of Mingxue Hall naturally wouldn't let her sit there for 4 hours. After the cultivator who received Xianxia reported to the manager of Mingxue Hall, an early-stage foundation-building cultivator, learned that it was Patriarch Jinghe's idea, so he came to pay a visit and gave Xianxia all the tasks she needed to do at Mingxue Hall. After reading the contents of the jade slip, Xianxia realized the cultivator who received her was right. These new disciples all had special teachers to teach them, so they didn't need to do anything. Besides, it wasn't convenient for her to do other chores. After a while, Xianxia looked up at the manager of Mingxue Hall and said, "That being the case, how about I help teach them their homework?" New disciples had to start teaching Daoist scriptures, and teaching Daoist scriptures had to start from learning how to read. Since the distant past era, many characters had been left behind. Cultivation techniques and treasures from different eras might use different characters. Disciples who had just come into contact with cultivation had to spend a lot of time learning how to read every day. The manager naturally didn't have any objections. After repeatedly agreeing, he informed the supervising disciple that Xianxia only needed to follow the supervising disciple to teach her homework. Xianxia sighed inwardly when she saw the various teaching methods of Mingxue Hall. When she embarked on the path of cultivation, all she knew was a cultivation technique. When she was in Mo family's village, even the old master didn't know that knowledge, so she could only explore it bit by bit. Later, she found second uncle and was taught by him personally. But how could uncle and niece take care of everything when they were wandering? Second uncle wasn't a teacher. Most of what she knew and learned were things she encountered on her own, and second uncle only remembered to teach her. In Xianxing school, each subject was clearly separated and taught by different cultivators. If she could do this back then, she wouldn't have had such a hard time. Nevertheless, she was just sighing. She was already very lucky to be able to reach this point. With second uncle's guidance, she was much better than individual cultivators who struggled to survive. After being led into the hall by the supervising cultivator, Xianxia saw that the prayer mats in the room were full of children between 6 and 17 years old. Their cultivation levels were between the first and third layer of the aura refining realm. When they saw her walking in, their gazes all fell on her. She didn't conceal her aura. In front of these early-stage aura refining disciples, the aura of a foundation-building cultivator was naturally very powerful. The steward coughed, and the children immediately stood up and respectfully saluted him. Disciple greets teacher. Although the steward was in the same realm as them, he was in charge of teaching them, so they addressed him as teacher. The steward led Xianxia to the center and said, "Disciples, this is Grandmaster Mo, the disciple of Patriarch Jinghe of Clear Spring Peak." Grandmaster Mo's talents were outstanding. She wasn't even 30 yet, but her cultivation level was already in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm. Patriarch Jinghe specially ordered Grandmaster Mo to come to Mingxue Hall. "From today onward, Grandmaster Mo will teach all of you together with me. I hope you'll seize this opportunity and cultivate diligently with Grandmaster Mo as your example." Xianxia saw that these children's eyes were filled with amazement and admiration. For them, nascent soul cultivators were like immortals. Furthermore, when they saw that Xianxia looked like she was in her 20s, yet she already had this kind of cultivation level, they were even more amazed. Under their attentive gazes, Xianxia recalled the first time she met Yi Jingwen. She was also amazed and thought how great it would be if she had this kind of power. She never expected that she would also become the object of admiration for these young disciples who had just entered the path of immortality. Alright, all of you can sit down. Today, we'll continue to study the Nanhua Heart Sutra. This mental cultivation technique is Xianxing School's basic mental cultivation technique, so it can't be underestimated. If there's anything wrong, please correct me, Grandmaster Mo. The steward bowed towards Xianxia, then invited her to sit on the praying mat in front of him. Last time, it was mentioned that, "It's not the other who has no self, it's not me who has no gain." It's near, but I don't know why. Do you all know what it means? A boy about 10 years old immediately raised his hand. The steward nodded with a smile. He was just worried that these children wouldn't dare to answer in front of Grandmaster Mo, but now that someone stood up, he felt relieved. The child stood up and looked at Mo Tienga before he answered, "It's not the other who has no self, it's not me who has no gain." This sentence means that without the other, there's no me, and without me, there's no the other. For example, if there's no good, there's no bad, and if there's no bad, there's no good. Two opposite things often need each other to present themselves. And very good. The steward asked again, "Then do you understand the meaning of the second sentence?" It's near, but it's near, which means that it's close to the root of things. I don't know why, which means that I don't know whether there's something pushing behind the scenes. This explanation makes sense. The steward nodded and looked at Mo Tienga. Seeing that she didn't have any intention to speak, he continued to say, "If this sentence is used on the path of cultivation, it's neither good nor evil, everything's at its source." Our Dao school pursues the way of the celestial being. The so-called Dao is like the laws of heaven and earth. There's a law in the dark. Therefore, although we don't insist on doing good, we can't act recklessly. After listening to the steward's explanation, the child bowed his head and said, "Yes, disciple will earnestly comprehend it." "Good, continue." "Things are nothing but that. Things are nothing but this. If you see that, you don't see it. If you know it, you know it." This steward was in the 8th layer of the aura refining realm. Judging from his age, he should be in his 40s, so it naturally wouldn't be a problem for him to explain this basic mental cultivation technique. Mo Tienga also didn't interrupt and just listened silently. It could be seen that the boy who answered at the beginning was quite outstanding when it came to Daoist scriptures. 70 to 80% of the questions asked by the steward were answered by him. However, Mo Tienga also discovered that the others seemed to be very unfriendly towards him. Whenever he answered a question, several people would secretly make faces at him. A slight frown appeared on Mo Tienga's face. Could it be that there were also cases of bullying and humiliation in this school? 4 hours passed very quickly. Mo Tienga discovered that this errand actually passed time very quickly. She only needed to answer some questions the steward found hard to answer. For her, aura-refining realm questions were very simple, so she didn't need to think too much about it. She even had to thank Luo Fengxue for thinking of a good solution for her. After she finished her time at Mingxue Hall, Mo Tienga returned to Shangqing Palace. Once she finished her errands for the day, she went to report to Lord Daoist Jinghe. Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was peeling grapes with his spiritual power, only looked at her. "Oh, you're back." Mo Tienga criticized him inwardly. This is a nascent soul cultivator who has nothing better to do, peeling grapes all day long. Nevertheless, she still looked well-behaved on the surface. "Yes, master. I've finished my errands for today." "Finished?" Lord Daoist Jinghe propped himself up and sat up. He said to her with great interest, "Tell me about it." Mo Tienga braced herself and said, "The steward's hall arranged for me to go to Mingxue Hall, so I went. I mainly had to answer some questions from new disciples." "Mingxue Hall?" Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded carelessly. "It was arranged by that girl Fengxue, wasn't it?" "I thought so. Aside from that girl, who else would think of letting you go to Mingxue Hall? That's for the best. New disciples will leave Mingxue Hall sooner or later, and at that time." Mo Tienga pricked up her ears. Could it be that there's a purpose to this arrangement? Unfortunately, Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't say anything more. He once again glared at her and said, "Why are you standing there in a daze? Quickly go and cultivate." Mo Tienga swallowed her words sullenly. "I don't need to think too highly of this master, he's just torturing me." From then on, Mo Tienga repeated these days. Collecting heavenly dew, taking care of spiritual plants, tidying up the beast yard, going to Mingxue Hall, and cultivating. Day after day, she became familiar with all the affairs in Shangqing Palace. Because she stayed in Mingxue Hall for a long time, she also became familiar with the affairs in Clear Spring Peak. Because of this, she somewhat understood why Lord Daoist Jinghe arranged these things for her to do. She had been in Xianxia school for 7 years, but 2 of them were in the foundation building realm and 2 of them were missing. In the remaining 3 years, she was in closed-door meditation all day and didn't integrate into the school at all. Now, she took care of Xianxia Palace's affairs every day and came into contact with cultivators in Mingxue Hall. She gradually became familiar with Clear Spring Peak and slowly became a real disciple of Xianxia school. Now that she understood all this, her feelings towards Lord Daoist Jinghe were complicated. This master almost never gave her pointers and didn't give her medicinal pills or treasures. Instead, he used this kind of method to correct her cultivation path. She was now 27 years old, but she was already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. What she lacked wasn't medicinal pills or treasures, but the growth of her mental state. In particular, from the early stage to the middle stage of the foundation building realm, she didn't experience any hardships and didn't have enough mental experience. With such an unstable cultivation level, it was easy to breed inner demons. Inner demons were the most terrifying hurdle on the road to the core formation realm and the nascent soul realm. Although he didn't say it explicitly, this cheap master actually had great expectations for her. Under a tree in Mingxue Hall, a 10-year-old boy was reading Daoist scriptures diligently. As the Tao, don't bother with the formula and keep the truth, all the joints in the Naiwen have the spirit. The spirit of the hair is blue, the word Taiyuan. The spirit of the brain, the word Naiwen. The spirit of the eyes, the word Yingxian. The spirit of the nose, the word Yulong. The word Lingjian. The spirit of the ears, the word Yingtian. The word divine ability, the word life, the word Zhengluan. His cultivation level was only in the first layer of the aura refining realm. He was only the most ordinary new disciple in Xianxia school and was still studying Daoist scriptures. But his hard work was also obvious to all. Apart from the daily morning classes, he spent the rest of his time reading Daoist scriptures. He had only been in the sect for 2 years, but he had already surpassed many ordinary disciples who were 15 or 16 years old. It had only been 2 years since he entered the school, but he had already surpassed many ordinary disciples who were 15 or 16 years old. Now, it was almost time for class to start. He seized the last bit of time he had to memorize this passage. As the Tao, don't bother with the formula and keep the truth, all the joints in the Naiwen have the spirit. The boy turned his head and saw 5 or 6 boys about his age making faces at him from a few meters away. One of the chubby boys shouted, "Yi Zhenji, your pants fell." Right after he said that, the other boys burst out laughing. The boy named Yi Zhenji glared at them fiercely, then turned around and continued to memorize. As the Tao, don't bother with the formula and keep the truth. Another plum flew over and hit him squarely. Although he had spiritual aura in his body, these boys weren't ordinary people. They used spiritual aura to hit him with plums, so it was really painful. Yi Zhenji understood he couldn't memorize anymore, so he put the book away and turned around with a fierce expression. "What do you want to do?" However, although he looked fierce, the others weren't scared. The chubby boy made faces at his companions. "Look, he's trying to scare us." Someone immediately pointed at him and laughed at him. "Yi Zhenji, aren't you afraid your pants will fall again?" Yi Zhenji's expression darkened, but he knew he couldn't beat them. Many of them were the descendants of the martial uncles in the school. They had been taught since they were young, so their cultivation levels were higher than his. He couldn't even beat one of them. Seeing that he didn't speak, the boys simply threw another plum at him. "Why aren't you dodging? Aren't you very powerful?" No matter what the teacher asked, you always answered. "What? You don't dare to do it now? Why are you being polite with him? Let's beat him up first. I've been so annoyed by him these past few days." An impetuous boy jumped out and shouted while pointing at him. The children were provoked and swarmed up to her. Yi Zhenji immediately turned around and ran. He knew he couldn't beat them, but he also didn't want to be beaten by them. If he ran to the front, they wouldn't dare to beat him because there were others around. But he didn't realize this idea. Before he could run far, he was hit by a plum, causing him to stagger. One of the boys immediately grabbed his sleeve, and the boys surrounded him and started beating him. These boys were smart and knew they couldn't act recklessly, so they only used their fists and feet without using spiritual aura. However, this made him feel even more pain. Xianxia was surrounded in the middle. He held his head, gritted his teeth, and didn't say a word. It was just pain. He'd be fine once he endured it. In any case, he was already used to it. Mo Tiange frowned. She just came to Mingxue Hall early, but she unexpectedly saw such a scene. She gently flicked her sleeves, and the children who were punching and kicking the boys in a circle immediately felt a strong wind sweep over them, and they were immediately knocked to the ground. Who? A chubby boy crawled up and shouted angrily, "Who dares to hit me? I'll call my father." "How about calling your father?" Mo Tiange looked at him coldly and took over the conversation. It was only then that the children saw her. They were instantly tongue-tied. Grandmaster Mo Tiange knew many of these children were juniors of cultivators in the school, so they developed arrogant and willful temperaments. She just didn't expect them to be arrogant to this extent. At such a young age, they already knew how to bully their fellow disciples. "What are you waiting for? Go to the training office and receive your punishment." Grandmaster Mo. Upon hearing what she said, the children shouted, We're just." Unfortunately, they couldn't even defend themselves. Mo Tiange didn't intend to listen to them. She helped the beaten boy up, turned her head and said, "Hurry up and go." Yes. The children left unhappily. They weren't stupid. Grandmaster Mo was Patriarch Jinghe's advanced inner disciple, so they didn't dare to say anything to Grandmaster Mo despite their status. If they made Grandmaster Mo angry again, their punishment would be even heavier. Mo Tiange turned her head to look at the child she helped up. She had some impression of this child because every time she gave sermons, he repeatedly answered questions and was praised by the cultivator in charge. The cultivator in charge once told her this child came from the secular world. He had no foundation and his aptitude was ordinary, so he wasn't valued much. However, he was very hardworking and knew how to work hard. People like him would most likely achieve something. At that moment, the child looked up and saluted her. "Thank you for saving me, Grandmaster." Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. She cast a small spell to heal the bruises on his body. "What's going on? Do they often beat you?" Xianxia looked at her cautiously and nodded slightly. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Xianxia's expression darkened. He answered, They all have backers. I don't, so it's useless to say anything." Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh. Even Xianqing School couldn't avoid this kind of problem. Disciples without foundation would inevitably be bullied. "Then don't you feel bad about being beaten by them?" The child bit his lip and nodded cautiously. "I'm not afraid. When I succeed in my cultivation, they naturally won't dare to bully me anymore." What he said was quite ambitious. Mo Tiange nodded inwardly and said with a smile, "When you succeed in your cultivation, you're only in the first layer of the aura refining realm right now, and your aptitude is also ordinary. How long do you want to wait?" Her words made Xianxia hang his head. He also knew his chances were slim, but if he didn't think that way, what else could he do? Mo Tiange couldn't help but think of herself. Didn't she also think the same way? Although her aptitude wasn't good and her path to immortality was uncertain, she firmly believed she'd succeed even though sometimes she also felt it was hopeless. She became a little interested in this child and asked, "What's your name?" "Xianxia." Yi as in Jin, as in real, and Ji as in fated chance. "Xianxia. Turns out your surname is Yi," Mo Tiange said. "In that case, we can be considered half from the same clan." Xianxia was surprised. "Grandmaster Mo, isn't your surname Mo?" Mo Tiange smiled. "I followed my mother's surname. My father's surname is actually Yi." "Oh?" Mo Tiange smiled again and said, "If they bully you again next time, just come and tell me." Xianxia suddenly raised his head and stared at her in astonishment. He was grateful to be saved by Grandmaster Mo, but he didn't have much hope. It was just this time. After those people were punished, they'd still bully him in the future. After all, Grandmaster Mo wasn't anyone to him. But now, Grandmaster Mo said this. Grandmaster Mo, you mean, Mo Tienga repeated patiently, if they beat you again in the future, just come and tell me. I'll help you. Yi Zhenji immediately jumped up upon hearing her confirmation. Really? Grandmaster Mo, you'll help me and won't let them bully me again? The child's face instantly bloomed with joy. Grandmaster Mo, you're really good to me. Ever since I left home, no one has been this good to me. Ever since I came here, they've been bullying me. They secretly cut my belt, causing me to drop my pants in front of everyone. At this point, he was a little embarrassed. I'm sorry, Grandmaster Mo. I shouldn't have said this in front of you. It doesn't matter. Since she had nothing to do, Mo Tienga didn't mind listening to a child's complaints. If you have anything to say, just say it. This child probably hadn't complained to anyone before, so he immediately became a chatterbox. When I was at home, my father always said how good it was to cultivate. He said our family was originally a cultivation clan, but it declined, so we had no choice but to move to the secular world. Since I was a child, I've always yearned to cultivate. Later, a martial uncle happened to pass by and discovered I had spiritual roots, so I followed him to Xianxia school. But now, I feel cultivators are very annoying. Chapter 140. Mo Tienga's heart skipped a beat. She asked, "Where's your home?" Yi Zhenji widened his eyes in confusion. "My home." Mo Tienga repeated, "Your home in the secular world." Although he didn't understand what this grandmaster wanted to do, he still answered honestly, "My home is in Tong, and city in Weigua. Have you heard of it, Grandmaster?" Tongan city in Weigua? Mo Tienga muttered and frowned. It seemed to be the one second uncle mentioned. She asked again, "Do you know the name Yicheng?" Yi Zhenji looked confused. "I think Patriarch Grandpa's name is Yi Cheng, but I'm not sure." Patriarch Grandpa. Second uncle moved Yi clan out of Mount Qingmeng about 20 years ago. At that time, the Patriarch Yi Cheng, who stayed in the secular world, was in his 40s and had very weak 5 spiritual roots. Now, he should be in his 60s. "Tell me about your family. Let me hear about it." A hint of vigilance appeared in Yi Zhenji's eyes. "Grandmaster, what do you want to hear?" How could Mo Tienga not see that this child was wary of her? She smiled and said, "Could it be that there's something in your family that I covet? Just tell me." Yi Zhenji thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. This grandmaster was the advanced inner disciple of a nascent soul cultivator. What could his declining family have that could attract her attention? He asked, "Grandmaster, what do you want to know?" "Just tell me. For example, what's the situation of your family? Did you also live in Kunwu?" When he mentioned his family's past, a smile appeared on Yi Zhenji's face. He said proudly, "My father said our family used to be in Kunwu, and our ancestors even produced many core formation cultivators. In the end, there was a granduncle who formed his gold core when he was just over 100 years old. At that time, he was famous in West Kunwu." At this point, a regretful expression appeared on his little face. But this granduncle also passed away more than 20 years ago. There weren't many people in our family, and there weren't many people with spiritual roots, so our family declined just like that. "So, there are no cultivators in your family now?" "Not really." Yi Zhenji tilted his head and said, "In fact, I'm not sure. My father said that at that time, there was another granduncle who was a foundation establishment cultivator, and he left after sending us to the secular world. However, that granduncle is old and hasn't contacted us for so many years, so we don't know if he's still around." "Didn't your granduncle leave behind any message talismans?" "I don't know. These are all things that happened before I was born. My father didn't tell me anything." It was normal for the child not to know such a question. Mo Tienga had already made up her mind, so she no longer said anything. She raised her finger and forced out a drop of blood. With a wave of her spiritual aura, that drop of blood immediately rushed towards the child. "Grandmaster, Yi Zhenji turned pale with fright. However, before he could finish speaking, The drop of blood already entered the space between his eyebrows and disappeared without a trace. Imotienga sensed that her blood essence entered the space between his eyebrows without any hindrance at all. It easily fused with him. This child was indeed her blood relative. Grandmaster? Yi Xinji sobered up and stared at her in horror. What's this? As Imotienga stared at the child, she was also a bit surprised. Kunwu was so big, but Yi clan's child actually happened to come to Xianxia school. This is a drop of blood identification. Huh? Yi Xinji was bewildered. Drop of blood identification? My blood essence is compatible with yours, and there's no rejection at all. This means we're blood relatives. Yi Xinji was completely dumbfounded. Imotienga stared at him. I don't know how we should address each other, but the core formation granduncle you mentioned died more than 20 years ago should be my father. Martial uncle your? Xiuqin was stunned to see Imotienga leading a boy into the side hall of Xianxia Palace. Ever since Imotienga taught them a lesson, Qin, Qi, Shu, and Hua became obedient. Even the other 12 people who heard about her methods also became a lot more restrained. They no longer gossiped in front of her, and their speech and behavior also became respectful and courteous. Imotienga faintly glanced at her. This is my grandnephew. I brought him here to pay respects to master. Grandnephew? Xiuqin was stunned. This martial uncle Imo just went to Mingxue Hall and brought back a grandnephew? Nevertheless, she was smart and didn't say much. She just bowed and said, Yes, Grandmaster is still in the main hall. Martial uncle can go and pay respects to him. Imotienga didn't linger and walked around Xiuqin while holding Yi Xinji's hand. Yi Xinji was very excited. He turned to look at Xiuqin, and when they were far away, he whispered, Grandmaster, you're so proud. Last time, I saw Grandmaster Jinghe's martial uncle come to Mingxue Hall to pass a message, but he didn't even look at our manager. Imotienga smiled. The manager of Mingxue Hall was only an ordinary early-stage foundation-building cultivator, so how could he enter these women's eyes? They'd been with nascent soul grandmasters for a long time, so they didn't even pay attention to ordinary core formation cultivators. Yi Xinji looked around again, feeling very curious. Ever since he came to Xianxia school, he'd only been to the main hall on the main peak once and spent the rest of his time in Mingxue Hall. He hadn't even seen an ordinary foundation-building martial uncle's Immortal's cave, let alone a nascent soul grandmaster's Immortal's cave. Imotienga couldn't help but smile as she looked at his innocent and happy appearance. This child had been very excited ever since he recognized himself as his relative. He originally thought he didn't have any backing and would definitely be bullied by others. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, he had a grandmaster who was related to him by blood. Those children who bullied him before couldn't compare to him, so he was so happy that he didn't know what to say. She recalled how Yi Xinji proudly stuck out his chest when she explained the reason to the cultivator in charge of Mingxue Hall, which made her feel both funny and pitiful. Xinji, our seniority can't be determined in a short time. I'm only 10 years older than you, so you can just call me auntie. There's no need to call me grandmaster. Oh. Yi Xinji raised his head to look at her, then called out in a low voice, Auntie. Imotienga smiled and stroked his head. You don't have to be so reserved. We're relatives, so we're different from them. Yi Xinji finally became a bit more courageous. I understand. Auntie, can I follow you in the future? And you should be able to. But before that, I have to report to the Grandmaster. In fact, Imotienga also wasn't sure. Her identity now was indeed different. Taking care of a blood-related junior shouldn't be a big problem, but she was now living in Lord Daoist Jinghe's Immortal's cave, and this master of hers wasn't serious. She really couldn't say for sure. Auntie. Yi Xinji raised his head to look at her, then asked worriedly, Won't this make things difficult for you? Imotienga was stunned. Just now, she unconsciously frowned, but this child was actually so sharp? Yi Xinji said, Auntie, if you're in trouble, you don't have to worry about me. Now that they know you're my granduncle, they won't dare to bully me anymore. Seeing the child's serious expression, Imotienga smiled and answered seriously, You don't have to worry. You'll understand after you meet the Grandmaster. N. As they spoke, the two of them arrived at the main hall. In Xianxia Palace, aside from Lord Daoist Jinghe himself, there were only the maids and her, so there was no need for anyone to report to them. Leading Yizhenji into the main hall, Mo Tiange saw that Lord Daoist Jinghe was still lying on his dragon chair, enjoying the service of the maids while flipping through an unknown book. He was also mumbling something. Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't even raise his head. "Oh, you're back. Why did you bring back a little guy today?" Mo Tiange let go of Yizhenji's hand and signaled him with her eyes. The child very cleverly knelt down and kowtowed. Yizhenji greets the Grandmaster. Mo Tiange said, "Master, this child is related to me by blood. I want to bring him back to teach him personally. I sincerely ask for your permission." Lord Daoist Jinghe was surprised. He then turned around and casually waved his hand at Yizhenji, signaling him to stand up. Then he turned to Mo Tiange. "What's going on? Where did this child come from?" Mo Tiange patiently reported, "When I went to Wuxia Hall today, this child happened to be bullied by others, so I conveniently saved him. Unexpectedly, this child actually came from my clan in the secular world." What a coincidence! Lord Daoist Jinghe wasn't interested in these trivial matters of the branch family. However, when he saw Yizhenji standing up and shrinking behind Mo Tiange timidly, his interest was piqued. "Little fella, come here and let Grandmaster have a look." Yizhenji raised his head to look at Mo Tiange. It was only after he saw her nod that he carefully moved to Lord Daoist Jinghe's side. He had never seen a nascent soul realm patriarch before. "How imposing! The little guy looks pretty good. He looks like you." As Lord Daoist Jinghe spoke, he grabbed Yizhenji's wrist. "Your aptitude is a bit lacking. You have 3 spiritual roots and, fortunately, all of your spiritual roots are fine, so building your foundation shouldn't be a problem. If you work hard, there's also hope for you to form your gold core." Yizhenji widened his eyes. He wasn't sad at all that the sovereign said his aptitude was a bit lacking because disciples who could enter Xianxia school all had excellent aptitudes. He only had 3 spiritual roots, so he could only be considered barely qualified. However, the ancestral master said that if he worked hard, he would be able to form his gold core. This was something he had never thought of. "That'll do. This kind of trivial matter, do as you see fit." Lord Daoist Jinghe let go of Yizhenji's hand, then lay back down. "You haven't formed your gold core yet, so you don't have the qualifications to accept disciples. Just leave him by your side for now." Mo Tiange was delighted to receive his consent. "Thank you, master." Thank me? Girl, you've been cursing me behind my back a lot. Forget it." Lord Daoist Jinghe waved his hand. Mo Tiange didn't feel embarrassed even though she was exposed in public. In any case, it was a fact that this cheap master of hers didn't act respectfully. She only saluted him one last time, then took Yizhenji away. "Zhenji, now that the sovereign has agreed, you can stay by my side from now on. I'll try my best to help you, but you also have to work hard, understand?" Yizhenji's face flushed with excitement. A nascent soul sovereign. He actually met a nascent soul sovereign. He thought for a moment, then asked, "Auntie, do I still have to go to Wuxia Hall in the future?" "Of course," Mo Tiange said. "You haven't finished learning the Daoist scriptures, so you still have to go." "What? You don't want to go?" No. Yizhenji repeatedly waved his hand, revealing a slightly embarrassed smile. He then secretly said, "Auntie, I actually want to go. I have Auntie now, so Jin and the others won't dare to bully me anymore. I just want to go and see their faces." Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh when she heard what he said. Sure enough, he was still a child. He was bullied in the past, but now he wanted to hold his head high. Mo Tiange nodded. "There's nothing wrong with being quick to repay gratitude and enmity. But you mustn't be too stubborn, understand?" When they arrived at Mingxin residence, Mo Tiange opened the restriction. After thinking for a moment, she took out a blank jade tablet and engraved some instructions on it. She then handed it to Yizhenji. "In the future, use this to open the defensive formation. Once they entered Mingxin residence, a small spiritual beast pounced on them and squeaked, startling Yizhenji. Mo Tiange said to Yizhenji, "This is Auntie's spiritual beast. You can call it Xiaohua. It's very smart, and its cultivation level is equivalent to an early-stage foundation building cultivator. In the future, if you need anything, you can call it." She then crouched down and stroked the Inferno Beast's head. "This is Zhenji. He's my nephew. In the future, treat him like you treat me, understand?" The Inferno Beast squeaked again and intimately bit the hem of Yizhenji's robe. It didn't stop until Yizhenji also stroked its head. Mo Tiange smiled. She took out a jade bottle and poured several medicinal pills into it. "Eat them and go play. If you want to go to the back mountain, that's fine." The Inferno Beast rolled its tongue and swallowed the medicinal pills. It then nodded at her and ran out of Mingxin residence, probably heading towards the spiritual beast courtyard in the back mountain. This Inferno Beast's cultivation level rose very quickly. Ever since they moved to Xianxia Palace, Missouri Tiange let it roam freely, so it often ran to the back mountain to play. Because there were restrictions in the Immortal's cave, Mo Tiange also let it go. After leading Yizhenji into the courtyard, Mo Tiange introduced everything to him one by one. "This is Auntie's Immortal's cave. This is the concocting room, this is the tool refining room, and this is the cultivation room. As for this resting room, it'll be yours from now on. If you need anything, you can just ask the martial uncles here. They're the Grandmaster's maids, so all the affairs in Xianxia Palace are managed by them." "Got it, Auntie." Yizhenji stood in the resting room and carefully touched the bed made of cold jade. There weren't many things in the room, but everything was so exquisite that he couldn't help but stare. "Where's your luggage?" Upon hearing Mo Tiange's question, Yizhenji took off the Qianquan bag hanging from his waist and poured out the things somewhat embarrassedly. There were some clothes, a few Daoist scriptures and mental cultivation techniques, some children's toys, 3 spirit stones, and several worn-out jade bottles. Mo Tiange opened them to take a look. There were healing medicinal pills and aura-nourishing pills, but there were only 2 or 3 of them. Among them, there was even an aura-nourishing pill that seemed to be half-eaten. Yizhenji seemed to feel his things were too shabby, so he said with a red face, "Auntie, when I left home, there wasn't much left in the house. I only left these few things, and Grandpa Patriarch gave them all to me." Mo Tiange smiled. Presumably, those people in the Yi clan with meager spiritual roots were still unwilling to leave, so even though they stayed in the secular world, they still cultivated. Moreover, most of the valuable things were with second uncle, so they originally didn't have anything valuable. After 20 years, it was very normal for there to be nothing left. She thought for a moment, then took out 7 or 8 jade bottles from her Qianquan bag. These 2 bottles contain aura-nourishing pills. There are 100 pills in each bottle. You should know how to use them. These are aura-converging pills. They're also medicinal pills for cultivation, and their effects are 10 times better than aura-nourishing pills. However, you'd better increase your cultivation level before taking them. The medicinal effects are too strong, and your current cultivation level is too low. These are aura-purifying pills. For every 10 aura-nourishing pills you take, you'll have to take 1 to expel pill toxins. These are refreshing pills. They're used to detoxify poisons. Presumably, all the poisons you've come into contact with can be detoxified with these pills. These are restorative panaceas. You'll use up all your spiritual aura in a fight of magical powers, so taking 1 can restore a lot of your spiritual aura. These are mind-clearing pills. They're used to calm the mind. If you feel uneasy, you can take 1. Seeing that Yizhenji's hands were trembling while holding the jade bottles, Mo Tiange smiled and took out a small pouch. "There are 200 spirit stones in here. I know you new disciples haven't graduated from Mingxue Hall yet, so you can't get a disciple's share. I'll give you these first for your cultivation." He only had 2 spirit stones in his possession, and he was reluctant to use them for a long time. Now that he suddenly received 200 spirit stones, Yizhenji was completely dumbfounded. But it wasn't over yet. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then took out the greenwood sword and the spirit-gathering pearl she no longer used. Touching these 2 things, she heaved a soft sigh. The spirit-gathering pearl wasn't a good thing, but it was left behind by her father. Moreover, it also guided her on the path of cultivation. After thinking for a while, she put it away and replaced it with a spirit-gathering formation she made herself. This is the greenwood sword. My second uncle passed it on to me. Now I'll pass it on to you. This thing has been refined by a core formation cultivator, so ordinary spirit tools can't compare to it. You have to use it well. As for this spirit-gathering formation, when you cultivate, you can place it in the surroundings to increase the density of spiritual aura. Xianxia received these things in a daze. Although he was only a new disciple, after entering Xianxia school, he still had some experience. He had seen spirit tools in the hands of fellow disciples, but they hadn't graduated from Mingxue Hall, so the school wouldn't give them spirit tools. Those who could have spirit tools were all people with powerful backgrounds. A small disciple from the secular world like him could only look at them with envy. However, this greenwood sword was obviously a high-grade spirit tool. It was much better than the ones he had seen before. Auntie, this is a lot. Since you're my relative, I'll naturally give you the best. Tianga's expression turned serious. However, you also have to remember that you can only rely on yourself to walk on the path of cultivation. If you're complacent and don't move forward, then no matter how many treasures you have, it'll be useless. Xianxia was startled by Tianga's stern shout, but he soon regained his composure. He obediently lowered his head and said, I understand. I'll cultivate diligently and live up to Auntie's expectations. Tianga was very satisfied that this child was so obedient. She stroked his head and said, All right, Auntie's going to cultivate. It's good for you to cultivate and familiarize yourself with it first. If you need anything, just call me outside the cultivation room. Tianga turned around and was about to leave, but Xianxia hastily called out, Auntie. Tianga stopped. When she saw Xianxia looking at her, she blushed and said in a low voice, I'm hungry. Stunned, she couldn't help but knock her own head, then said with a smile, Auntie hasn't eaten for a long time, so I forgot you still need to eat. Wait a moment, I'll call someone to bring you some food. After returning to the cultivation room, Tianga first sent a summoning talisman to Xiuqin, asking her to call someone to bring her food every day. After that, she arranged a formation and entered the virtual sky world. Standing inside the virtual sky world, she felt the gentle breeze and exhaled. However, she didn't immediately enter the hut to cultivate. Instead, she sat down by the stream. She didn't expect to run into someone from Yi Clan. She never grew up in Yi Clan, so Yi Clan only existed in her imagination. However, before second uncle passed away, he always told her to take care of Yi Clan if she had the ability in the future. Now that she ran into a child from Yi Clan, she naturally couldn't ignore him. This child told her that Yi Clan lived a good life in the secular world. There were still several cultivators in the clan. Although their cultivation levels were low and not worth mentioning in Kunwu, they were immortals in the eyes of mortals. Yi Clan quickly gained a foothold in Wei country. Now, they were rich and healthy, and they even became Marquis Chang Ningho in Wei country. Hearing this, Tianga felt relieved. In the past, Yi Clan was forced to move to the secular world because apart from second uncle, they didn't have any real cultivators. Even if they had spiritual roots, they only had 5 spiritual roots and could barely reach the second or third layer of the aura refining realm by relying on medicinal pills. However, living in the secular world was already enough. Far away from the bloody storms of the cultivation world, they could still enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and rank in the secular world. What else could they ask for? Even if Lord Daoist Jinghe's clan in the secular world produced a nascent soul cultivator and a core formation cultivator, it was still just an ordinary rich clan. At first, those people from Yi clan also gave up. However, 10 years ago, Xianxia was born and was unexpectedly tested to have 3 spiritual roots. Yi clan was wild with joy. Later, when Xianxia school disciples ran errands in the secular world, the patriarch of Yi clan treated Xianxia with a lot of money, so Xianxia was able to return to Kunwu and even entered a famous clan. This matter was only a trivial matter, so even the stewards hall of Clear Spring Peak didn't know Yi Zhenji's identity and origin. Thus, they didn't report it to Lord Daoist Jinghe or Master Daoist Shoujing, so Mo Tiange naturally had no way of knowing. If it wasn't for Lord Daoist Jinghe tormenting her and Luo Fengxue making her go to Mingxue Hall, she would have probably waited until she formed her gold core and went to the secular world to fulfill second uncle's wish before she learned of Yi Zhenji's existence. At that time, if Yi Zhenji's luck wasn't good, he might have already become old. Yi clan racked their brains to send Yi Zhenji to Xianxia school. First, they didn't want to waste Yi Zhenji's talent. Second, they probably wanted to revitalize their clan. However, Yi Zhenji's spiritual roots were only ordinary. He was already very lucky to be able to enter a big cultivation group, so Yi clan didn't have any delusions. However, because of this, Mo Tiange had another thought. It had only been a few years since Yi clan left Kunwu, so they obviously still wanted to return to Kunwu. If they found out about her existence, she was afraid they might have some other thoughts. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange made a decision. That being the case, she didn't plan to let Yi clan know of her existence for the time being. If they found out, some troubles would inevitably arise. Of course, she didn't want to hide it forever. When the time was right, she would go back to Yi clan and tell them second uncle's last wish. But in that case, she would inevitably warn Yi clan that if they didn't have enough high-level cultivators, they shouldn't think about returning to Kunwu. How many small cultivation clans had been wiped out in Kunwu? Yu clan from Danding School still had several foundation-building cultivators, but after a disaster, they declined just like that. Mo Tiange didn't know whether they could survive or not. In that case, it would be better to stay in the secular world and enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and rank. If they produced a descendant with good spiritual roots, she would naturally lend a helping hand. Mo Tiange shook her head and threw these thoughts to the back of her mind. She stood up and returned to the small room inside the virtual sky world, preparing to cultivate. Yi Zhenji hadn't even finished reading the Daoist scriptures, so he still had a long way to go. When the time came, she would give him some medicinal pills and ask her master to help him. Presumably, building his foundation wouldn't be a problem, and he might even have a high chance of forming his gold core. After making this decision, Mo Tiange sat down, sank her aura into her dantian, and started today's cultivation. Chapter 141. Auntie. Upon hearing Yi Zhenji's cheerful voice, Mo Tiange came out of the virtual sky world and opened the cultivation room's restriction with a wave of her hand. With a smile on his face, Yi Zhenji bumped into her. What's wrong? Yi Zhenji ran over and looked up at her. Auntie, I went to Mingxue Hall today. When Jilin and the others saw me, they all ran far away. It was so funny. Mo Tiange smiled and stroked his head. Are you very happy? Yi Zhenji nodded vigorously. I've always thought that when I built my foundation, I'd beat them all to the ground so they wouldn't dare to bully me. Mo Tiange smiled. When she was in Mo family's village, she also had the same idea. She wanted to read good books, listen to her mother, and when she grew up, she would teach Tianjun and the others a lesson. In the end, Tianjun didn't bully her anymore, and she also walked on a different path. Although they don't dare to bully you now, you still have to work hard to build your foundation. You can't always rely on others, understand? Auntie, I'll work hard to cultivate and won't embarrass you, Yi Zhenji said earnestly. I know my aptitude isn't good, but before I came to Kunwu, Grandpa Patriarch told me that hard work can make up for my lack of talent. As long as I cultivate hard, I still have hope of advancing. It's good that you understand. Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. At first, my aptitude was worse than yours, but in the end, I still built my foundation. Therefore, although aptitude is important, hard work and fated chances can't be underestimated. Yi Zhenji blinked. He understood the second half. But what did the first half mean? Auntie, they said you were accepted as a disciple by the Grandmaster when you were only in the foundation building realm because your aptitude was higher than that of a single spiritual root. Why did you say your aptitude was bad? If your aptitude was bad, the Grandmaster wouldn't have accepted you as a disciple, right? Both of these sentences are correct. Auntie's spiritual root is a very special kind of spiritual root. Before I built my foundation, I always thought my aptitude was bad, but after I built my foundation, I realized that wasn't the case. But if that's the case, you were able to build your foundation because your aptitude is good, right? This question startled Mo Tiange. The vision triggered during her foundation building had indeed made her suspicious for a very long time. Mo Tiange didn't know whether her success in building her foundation was related to the spiritual roots of the origin or not. Maybe the art of Sunu also had something to do with it. Although she didn't know what the spiritual roots of the origin were before she built her foundation and considered them to be almost useless spiritual roots, maybe she benefited from the spiritual roots of the origin when she advanced. That's not necessarily the case. Auntie also had a hard time cultivating in the qi condensation realm. At that time, it was my second uncle who took care of me and provided me with a large amount of medicinal pills for my cultivation. That's why I was able to reach the foundation building realm one day. Xianxia pondered for a moment, then smiled again. I understand. Auntie has granduncle to take care of her, and I also have Auntie to take care of me. I'll work hard to make a realm breakthrough just like Auntie. This child was smart and sensible. He didn't need anyone to take care of him all the time. Just a few words of advice from time to time would do. Mo Tiange chuckled and patted his head. It's good that you know. All right, you've been dawdling for so long. Hurry up and cultivate. All right, I'll go now, Xianxia answered obediently, then went back to cultivate. Mo Tiange closed her eyes and released her divine sense. The cultivation technique Xianxia practiced was the same as that of all new disciples. It was Xianxia school's most basic cultivation technique, the Nanhua Heart Sutra. In fact, all new disciples of Xianxia school, regardless of their aptitude, spiritual roots, or status, had to practice Nanhua Heart Sutra first to lay their foundation. When Mo Tiange entered the school several years ago, although she wasn't a new disciple, she still roughly studied it. This Daoist scripture was indeed an ideal introductory cultivation technique. This cultivation technique didn't require the attribute of one's spiritual roots. The cultivation speed wasn't fast, and it couldn't be used in fights of magical powers. However, it allowed one to comprehend the Tao of heaven and earth, cultivate one's heart, and cultivate one's nature. If one could cultivate Nanhua Heart Sutra properly before practicing other cultivation techniques, there would be a lot fewer barriers to one's nature. Although Xianxia's spiritual roots weren't obvious, he had a good understanding of Daoist scriptures. His nature and perception were also pretty good. Mo Tiange watched him for a while. Seeing that his cultivation was going smoothly, she no longer paid attention to him and entered the virtual sky world to continue cultivating. Time passed quickly. After she finished cultivating, Mo Tiange went to Mingxue school to give Xianxia some pointers, then entered the virtual sky world to cultivate. And so on. After 2 years of peace and tranquility, 2 major events happened on Clear Spring Peak at the same time. The first matter was that Master Daoist Xianyin was about to enter closed-door meditation to attack the nascent soul realm. When Mo Tiange learned about this, she was very happy. Senior martial brother Xianyin was their master's #1 disciple. Not only was he the earliest to enter the school, but his aptitude was also the best. He was already more than 400 years old now, yet he was still stuck in the core formation realm. Now that he finally entered closed-door meditation to attempt to form his nascent soul, Mo Tiange inwardly prayed that this martial uncle or senior martial brother who always took care of her could smoothly form his nascent soul. If senior martial brother Xianyin really succeeded, she would have to call him martial uncle Xianyin instead. According to the rules of the immortal cultivation world, once one reached the nascent soul stage, one would be a grandmaster. Although the master who entered the sect was still the master, the disciples of the same sect still had to address each other according to their cultivation level. The other thing was that Daoist Shou Jing had been in isolation for 2 years and successfully entered the late stage of the core formation realm. When Mo Tiange heard this, she just smiled and said nothing. Later, when she ran into Luo Fengxue, she tried to sound her out, but she also calmly rejected her. Speaking of which, she still hadn't met this senior martial brother Shou Jing. When she officially became her master's disciple 2 years ago, this senior martial brother Shou Jing had been in closed-door meditation and rarely left his cave. These two things weren't big, but they weren't small either. In the past 2 years, Tiange had been dealing with Shangqing Palace's affairs and gradually got closer to the power center of Xianxia School, so she also learned some things. Xianxia School had a total of 5 nascent soul cultivators. Among them, the head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Daoist Jinyang, was in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, Lord Daoist Jinghe was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, and the remaining Lord Daoist Lingshu, Lord Daoist Miaoi, and Lord Daoist Huayan were in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. Lord Daoist Jinyang was undoubtedly the pillar of Xianxia School, but the other nascent soul cultivators were also the foundation of Xianxia School. Losing one nascent soul cultivator would greatly reduce the school's strength. Right now, Lord Daoist Lingshu's lifespan was about to run out. In 100 years at most, this Lord Daoist would pass away. This was also the reason why Master Daoist Xianyin was in closed-door meditation to advance to the nascent soul realm, and the reason why he was so happy about Master Daoist Shou Jing advancing to the late stage of the core formation realm. When a nascent soul cultivator passed away, another nascent soul cultivator would be needed to fill the gap to ensure the school's strength and status. Of course, these things had nothing to do with her. Right now, Tiange encountered something that made her not know whether to laugh or cry. Senior Martial Sister Tiange had been very careful since she was ordered to go to the main peak by her master, but she still heard a surprised and gentle call from behind her. She instantly had the urge to step on the white silk handkerchief and fly back to her cave. She adjusted her expression, turned around and smiled. Junior Martial Brother Bai. This Junior Martial Brother Bai wasn't Zhan Bai. Although Zhan Bai had always been called Little Bai, Martial Uncle Bai, or Junior Martial Brother Bai, his surname was Zhan. This guy's real surname was Bai, and his name was Yanfei. He was the disciple of Xianxia School's head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Daoist Jinyang. He had a single spiritual root that was hard to come by in 100 years. As soon as he entered the school, Lord Daoist Jinyang made an exception and accepted him as his disciple. This junior martial brother Bai was now 25 years old and had been in the foundation building realm for 3 years. Ever since Tiange was officially accepted as Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple, almost all the affairs in Shangqing Palace were handed over to her. She was even in charge of some matters related to the Grand Supreme Elders. As a result, she gradually came into contact with the real heavenly favored ones in the school. The so-called heavenly favored ones could be said to be the elite disciples among elite disciples. In Yunwu sect in the past, foundation-building cultivators could accept disciples, so elite disciples were only slightly better than ordinary disciples. Big cultivation groups like Xianxia School, on the other hand, were different. Only core formation cultivators were qualified to accept disciples. Needless to say, disciples who could become disciples of core formation cultivators had to have outstanding talents, but they also had to have a good attitude and comprehension. Such elite disciples were naturally much better than ordinary disciples. However, heavenly favored ones could only be called disciples under nascent soul cultivators, and their cultivation levels had to be especially outstanding. For example, there was one in Clear Spring Peak, Master Daoist Shou Jing. He started cultivating at the age of 8 and became Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple as soon as he entered the school. He built his foundation at the age of 20 and formed his gold core at the age of 78. In Xianxia School, he was one of the core formation cultivators most likely to form their nascent souls. Tiange could also be considered a disciple of Lord Daoist Jinghe. She was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age and received her master's attention and high hopes. Forming her gold core was only a matter of time, and she might even form her nascent soul. This by Yanfei was the same. In terms of status, he was the last disciple of the head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Daoist Jinyang. In terms of cultivation level, he built his foundation at the age of 22 and was now 25. His future was boundless. If it was before, Tiange wouldn't have dared to believe she could make friends with someone with such status. But now, she only had a headache. This was how things started. She was now the one running errands for her master. A few days ago, she happened to go to Lord Daoist Jinyang's Immortal's cave to handle some matters for her master. She didn't know what was wrong with this junior martial brother Bai, but as soon as he saw her, not only was he overly enthusiastic, but he also invited her to meet him from time to time. In the beginning, Tiange didn't think there was any harm in making friends with such a person. Unexpectedly, after several visits, she realized something was wrong. This junior martial brother Bai obviously didn't treat her as a senior martial sister and junior martial brother. He seemed to be pursuing her. Upon realizing this, whenever Bai Yanfei invited her again, she would find all kinds of reasons to dismiss him. However, for some unknown reason, the more she refused Bai Yanfei, the more enthusiastic he became. Almost every time she left Xianxia Palace, this person would use all kinds of methods to find out her whereabouts. He would then pretend to stick to her unintentionally, causing Tiange to be afraid to go out recently. But even if she didn't dare to go out, she still had to go out. She had to carry out the things her master told her to do. If she accidentally ran into Bai Yanfei, she could only pretend she didn't know and think of a way to dismiss him. This matter made Tiange feel strange. When she was a teenager, she always disguised as a man. When she came to Xianxia school, she changed her appearance to that of a woman. Moreover, she was always under Lord Daoist Jinghe's protection, so she had never experienced any pursuers. Now that one suddenly came, it made her want to avoid him like the plague. Seeing that she didn't look displeased, Bai Yanfei walked towards her with a smile. He was quite handsome, and he was also Lord Daoist Jinyang's last disciple, so he also had some admirers. However, Tiange didn't have any feelings for him. Senior martial sister Bai Yanfei smiled at her. Long time no see. This time, Tiange indeed hid for a long time. Because of this, she even asked Lord Daoist Jinghe not to go to Mingxue Hall. She holed up in Xianxia Palace every day and didn't go out. No matter what Bai Yanfei's intentions were, he was always polite and courteous to her face, so Tiange answered with a smile, "It's nothing. I've been practicing a secret technique recently, so I don't have time to go out." "Really?" Bai Yanfei's eyes brightened. "What secret technique is it? Senior martial sister, do you want to study it together? How could it be called a secret technique if I casually mentioned it?" Tiange paused for a moment, then squeezed out a smile. "Junior martial brother Bai, why are you here? Did you come to do something?" "Sort of," Bai Yanfei said vaguely, then said, "Senior martial sister, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Since we ran into each other, how about we have a good gathering? This isn't too convenient, right?" Tiange said, "My master still has something he wants me to do. Junior martial brother Bai, I'm sorry, but I'll take my leave first." She immediately got on the white silk handkerchief and flew towards Clear Spring Peak. "Senior martial sister," Bai Yanfei called out from behind her. Tiange didn't dare to stay and didn't even look back. She flew back to Clear Spring Peak and rushed into Xianxia Palace. Tiange only heaved a sigh of relief when she saw Bai Yanfei didn't follow her. She was really afraid of this junior martial brother Bai. She really didn't understand. Although her identity wasn't ordinary now and her aptitude wasn't bad, there were many beautiful and outstanding female cultivators in Xianxia school. Was it necessary for him to chase after her like this? "Why are you burning your buttocks?" Lord Daoist Jinghe's voice rang in her ears. She didn't make it, so she went straight through the main entrance. Once she passed through the main entrance, she saw the main hall. Lord Daoist Jinghe was meditating, which was very rare. Now that he was disturbed by her, he was glaring at her while blowing his beard. "Master," she called out obediently. Lord Daoist Jinghe glared at her and stopped meditating. "What happened? I told you to go to the main peak to pass a message, but you ended up like this? Was there a wolf chasing after you?" "There wasn't a wolf, but there was someone," Tiange answered. She'd been his disciple for a long time, so she didn't mind. She found a seat, sat down, and poured tea for herself. Someone? Lord Daoist Jinghe was surprised. Who was chasing you? Then. Mo Tiange only drank half of her tea. She rolled her eyes and told him the truth. It was junior martial brother Bai Yanfei from Morning Sun Peak. Bai Yanfei? Lord Daoist Jinghe thought for a while. Is he old Daoist Jinyang's disciple? Seeing Mo Tiange nodding, Lord Daoist Jinghe was even more surprised. Why was he chasing you? I also found it strange, Mo Tiange said. Junior martial brother Bai was too enthusiastic. Ever since I met him, he often invited me out. I didn't want to go. He was doing it out of kindness. If I went, I'd be a bit overwhelmed. Kindness. Lord Daoist Jinghe immediately understood and snorted. This brat is really bold. He actually wanted to attack my disciple. Attack? Mo Tiange stared at him with a puzzled expression. Master, junior martial brother Bai was very good to me. He didn't attack me at all. Oomph. Lord Daoist Jinghe snorted even harder. He curled his lips and glared at her. Keep pretending. Do you dare to say you didn't say it for me to hear on purpose? Having been exposed, Mo Tiange immediately became well-behaved. Yes, master. I think this brat is very annoying, but it's not good to directly send him away, so I wanted to ask master to deal with him. Upon hearing what she said, Lord Daoist Jinghe showed an expression that said, that's more like it. He then raised his head complacently. Don't play tricks in front of master. You're just a little girl who's lived for more than 20 years. What else can you hide from me? Mo Tiange smiled modestly. Yes, but how could I compare to you, master? You've lived for more than 800 years and you've almost become a demon. Lord Daoist Jinghe felt refreshed after being flattered. However, he only laughed twice when he suddenly realized what she said wasn't quite right. Damn girl. You actually called me an old fart? No way. Mo Tiange immediately clasped her palms together. Master, I'm sincerely expressing my respect and also asking you to help me deal with this matter. Lord Daoist Jinghe's temperament was that he loved to brag and flatter others. Once Mo Tiange assumed this posture, he was immediately appeased. He merely let out a thumph and cast her a sidelong glance. His tone became amiable. Tell me, what's going on with this brat? Mo Tiange said, I'm also quite muddle-headed. It's just that when I went to Morning Sun Peak to ask to see Martial Uncle Xianxiang, junior martial brother Bai received me for a while. Later on, he often invited me out. This was the truth. She herself didn't understand what this junior martial brother Bai saw in her. Cultivation level? It wasn't that there weren't any young female cultivators in the middle stage of the foundation building realm in the school. Martial Uncle Miaoyi of Blue Phoenix Peak had a senior martial sister in the middle stage of the foundation building realm in her 30s. That senior martial sister reached this stage through solid cultivation, unlike Mo Tiange who reached this stage purely because of fated chances. Appearance? Mo Tiange thought her appearance wasn't bad, but in the cultivation world where beauties were as common as clouds, it didn't count as much. Identity? Being the disciple of a nascent soul grandmaster, Lord Daoist Jinghe, was indeed an extremely high identity. But at the same time, whatever she had, that senior martial sister from Blue Phoenix Peak also had. Furthermore, that senior martial sister wasn't the only one. Martial Uncle Lingshu from Drifting Cloud Peak also had a junior martial sister who was in her early 20s and was even younger than her. Once Mo Tiange finished speaking, Lord Daoist Jinghe pondered for a moment then nodded. This brat has a bit of insight. My, Qin Jinghe's, disciple is naturally better than others. Mo Tiange clenched her teeth. Master. Upon seeing Mo Tiange's angry gaze, Lord Daoist Jinghe immediately burst into laughter. Don't. Master is praising you. Of the two girls you mentioned, the one under Miaoyi isn't as beautiful as you, and the one under Old Man Lingshu isn't as smart as you. If the three of them were placed in front of him to choose, he'd definitely choose you. In my opinion, this brat's Dao heart is definitely unstable. He wants to find someone to perform dual cultivation with, but he's too arrogant and doesn't want anyone who's slightly inferior. After picking and choosing, only these few people meet his requirements. He's known Miaoyi and old man Lingshu's disciples since they were little, but he probably doesn't like either of them. As soon as he saw you, he felt you were better than the other two, so he naturally stuck to you. What he said was quite reasonable. Mo Tiange was silent for a while. Master, in that case, help me deal with it. I don't want to think about dual cultivation right now. Lord Daoist Jinghe said arrogantly, that's natural. How could it be that easy to hook up with my disciple? He then changed the topic and said with a smile, Tiange, you really don't want to consider dual cultivation? In fact, dual cultivation has a lot of benefits. Mo Tiange refused without thinking. You really don't want to? I'm telling you, forget about that brat. Master will choose a good one for you. I already said I don't want to. Lord Daoist Jinghe felt bored by her resolute refusal. Fine. You're just like that stinky brat. You don't want to be taught at all. How can I be taught about this kind of thing? Master, have you ever performed dual cultivation? Lord Daoist Jinghe choked on her words. He then turned around and glared at her. What does that have to do with you? Whether I perform dual cultivation or not has nothing to do with you, Master. Mo Tiange stood up. I'm going back to cultivate. In any case, Master, help me deal with it. Chapter 142. Old Daoist Jinyang. Lord Daoist Jinghe broke into Lord Daoist Jinyang's cave in an imposing manner and shouted like an enemy, come out. Lord Daoist Jinyang's cave was as simple as most cultivators, but it didn't lack anything it should have. As one of the 4 or 5 late-stage nascent soul cultivators in the Celestial Pole and the person with the highest power in Xianxia school, Lord Daoist Jinyang's cave was naturally heavily guarded with numerous restrictions. If an enemy really came, he wouldn't be able to do anything. However, it was Lord Daoist Jinghe, so the guarding disciples could only helplessly let him come and go as he pleased. Lord Daoist Jinyang, who was cultivating, opened his eyes and waved his hand to remove the restrictions around him, letting Lord Daoist Jinghe in. Different from Lord Daoist Jinghe's style of a fatuous ruler, Lord Daoist Jinyang wore a simple sect Daoist robe and tied his hair in a bun. He looked calm and composed, looking like a real expert with a transcendent demeanor. Seeing Lord Daoist Jinghe breaking into his cave, Lord Daoist Jinyang just raised his eyelids and then lowered them again. His voice was gentle and calm. What's up? What's up? You're asking me what's up? Lord Daoist Jinghe yelled, Old Daoist Jinyang, are you jealous of me because I accepted a genius disciple but don't dare to say it? Not to mention Xianxia school, perhaps only Lord Daoist Jinghe would talk to Lord Daoist Jinyang like this in the entire Celestial Pole. Lord Daoist Jinyang was also a genius in the past. He advanced to the nascent soul realm when he was about 200 years old and advanced to the late stage of the nascent soul realm when he was about 600 years old. From then on, he roamed the Celestial Pole for hundreds of years, and only 3 or 4 late-stage nascent soul cultivators could rival him. The reason why he couldn't be sure was that one of the old monsters in the late stage of the nascent soul realm had been living in seclusion for a long time and no one knew whether he was still alive or not. As for Lord Daoist Jinghe, his cultivation experience couldn't be regarded as the best in either Xianxia school or the Celestial Pole. He could only be regarded as excellent. However, only Lord Daoist Jinghe talked like this, and Lord Daoist Jinyang listened. There were reasons for this. First, although Lord Daoist Jinghe's cultivation level was only in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, he was combative by nature and had a deep understanding of fights of magical powers. He had treasures and secret techniques in his hands, so even great cultivators in the late stage of the nascent soul realm wouldn't dare to say they could win against him for sure. Second, his temperament was like this. Lord Daoist Jinyang knew this very well, so why would he fight with him over this trivial matter? Therefore, even though Lord Daoist Jinghe was making a big fuss, Lord Daoist Jinyang still looked indifferent and didn't even glance at him. You have your own disciple, and I have mine. Why should I be jealous of you? Not jealous? Lord Daoist Jinghe sneered. If you're not jealous, why did you let your disciple seduce my disciple? This sentence made Lord Daoist Jinyang a little confused, so he raised his eyelids. This choice of words was really inelegant, but Lord Daoist Jinghe continued to sneer. Don't tell me you don't know. You took in a disciple with a single spiritual root and treated him like a treasure. I don't believe you don't know about such a big matter as him seducing my disciple. Lord Daoist Jinghe deliberately emphasized the word big matter. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Lord Daoist Jinyang from the corner of his eyes, meaning, don't try to fool me. You mean Yanfei? Lord Daoist Jinyang raised his eyes. There were only a few disciples with a single spiritual root in Xianxia school, so he only needed to think for a moment to know who Lord Daoist Jinghe was talking about. You're not muddle-headed yet. Lord Daoist Jinghe ridiculed him. Soon after, he said in a seemingly sincere tone, I say, old Daoist Jinyang, my disciple is very good, but you still have to ask me whether I can seduce him or not. Otherwise, wouldn't it be very bad if we hurt our friendship? Lord Daoist Jinyang wasn't fooled by his words. He just asked, what's going on? Either speak properly or don't waste time. The only person in Xianxia school who could talk to Lord Daoist Jinghe like this was Lord Daoist Jinyang. Lord Daoist Jinghe knew this old Daoist was impatient, so he should stop while he was ahead. He immediately chose to speak nicely. I don't know what wrong medicine your disciple took, but he's been so attentive to my disciple that my disciple doesn't even dare to go out. What? You really don't know? How could I know such a trivial matter? After hearing the whole story, Lord Daoist Jinyang couldn't help but have a headache. This Jinghe was really something. Did he really have to report to his master that his disciple was attentive to a woman? Who was as free as him? He was already in the nascent soul realm, but he still came to question his disciple over such a trivial matter? Nevertheless, he still slowed down his voice to confirm. You mean Yanfei is pursuing your disciple? And the little disciple you just accepted, right? Yes. Lord Daoist Jinghe nodded, then put his hand on Lord Daoist Jinyang's shoulder. He once again said earnestly, Senior Martial Brother Jinyang, don't say I didn't give you face. My disciple is good, but I really can't give her to your disciple. Tell your disciple not to worry, okay? Lord Daoist Jinyang was confused. My disciple is unmarried, and your disciple isn't. Is there a problem? Is such a trivial matter worth you coming here in person? Lord Daoist Jinghe was furious. Trivial matter? I'm telling you, this isn't a trivial matter. He looked around mysteriously, then leaned close to Lord Daoist Jinyang and said in a low voice, This disciple of mine was brought back by my brat. You also know what kind of personality that brat has. It's so rare for him to bring back a girl. Right now, he's in a hurry to form his nascent soul and can't take care of this matter. If I don't take care of her for him, he'll be angry with me when he comes out of closed-door meditation. Lord Daoist Jinghe then added, You should tell your disciple not to pester my disciple anymore. It's useless even if she thinks about it. Lord Daoist Jinyang already understood what Lord Daoist Jinghe said, but Lord Daoist Jinghe complacently added, which made him unhappy. Your disciple has his own good points, but my disciple has a single spiritual root that's hard to come by in 100 years. She's young and promising, and her future is bright. Why would he pester your disciple? I think he's just bored and wants to talk to your disciple. You shouldn't think too much about young people's interactions. I'm thinking too much? Lord Daoist Jinghe shouted, If I'm really thinking too much, would that brat keep asking my disciple out? Old Daoist Jinyang, don't just protect your disciple. Although your disciple has a single spiritual root, compared to my disciple, she's just SOSO. Do you want to know what my disciple's aptitude is? I won't tell you first. Lord Daoist Jinyang's face darkened when he saw Lord Daoist Jinghe blowing his own trumpet. All right, don't treat your disciple like a treasure. There are many people who want to perform dual cultivation with my disciple. Do you need to rush to please your disciple? What are you worrying about? Hey, old Daoist Jinyang, you're jealous? Jealous? I'm jealous? I have a disciple with a single spiritual root. Do I need to be jealous of you? Is such a trivial matter worth you coming here in person? Go back. Lord Daoist Jinyang was annoyed that his disciple kept being belittled. He flung his sleeve and ordered him to leave. Do you think I'll go back just because you tell me to? Lord Daoist Jinghe argued with him. I'm telling you, my disciple has the spiritual root of the origin. You know what the spiritual root of the origin is, right? She even obtained the art of the origin and is in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm before she's 30. Can your disciple do it? She only has a single spiritual root. She's still far from being able to catch up to my disciple. Spiritual root of the origin. Lord Daoist Xianxia was fuming, but when he heard that, he paused for a moment. Your disciple has the spiritual root of the origin from the distant past era? Yes. Lord Daoist Xianxia raised his head. The next moment, Lord Daoist Xianxia sneered. So what if she has the spiritual root of the origin? It's been lost for hundreds of thousands of years. I don't know what will happen to it. My disciple has a solid single spiritual root. She can't be that bad. Old Daoist Xianxia. Lord Daoist Xianxia was waiting for Lord Daoist Xianxia to admit defeat a moment ago, but when he heard what Lord Daoist Xianxia said, he also fumed. What's the use of a single spiritual root? How many of us nascent soul cultivators have single spiritual roots? Old man Song Feng has 3 spiritual roots, but you still can't beat him. Lord Daoist Xianxia was also angry when he heard Lord Daoist Xianxia mentioning this. When did I lose to him? It's just that the winner hasn't been decided yet. Then he said sarcastically, haven't you always looked down on old man Song Feng? Why are you speaking for him now? You also have a single spiritual root. Isn't a single spiritual root good? How did you cultivate it? It's because I have a single spiritual root that I don't speak for it. What's so great about a single spiritual root? Many people with single spiritual roots can't even cultivate to the nascent soul realm. Lord Daoist Xianxia was already pestering him endlessly. Lord Daoist Xianxia was so angry that he laughed. Qin Jinghe, you're itching for a beating, aren't you? I'll fulfill your wish. As he spoke, he took out something, clasped his hands together, and threw it at Lord Daoist Xianxia. Lord Daoist Xianxia flashed, and a surge of spiritual aura blasted a stone wall into ashes. He was also burning with anger. He took out a gourd, raised it, and a wisp of real fire spurted out of the gourd. He shouted, Old man Xianxia, if I don't teach you a lesson, you'll really think I'm easy to bully. Lord Daoist Xianxia didn't speak. Instead, he withdrew his magic weapon and attacked again. Imo naturally didn't know that her casual words caused the 2 most powerful nascent soul cultivators in Xianxing school to fight each other and almost raze Lord Daoist Xianxia's Immortal's cave to the ground. Of course, this was actually because Lord Daoist Xianxia was too good at stirring up trouble. Anything he said would make people unhappy, and it didn't have much to do with her. At that moment, she stepped into Yizhenji's small room with a solemn expression. 2 years had passed. Yizhenji had grown a lot taller, and his cultivation level had also improved. A few days ago, he finished his studies at Mingxue Hall and became an official disciple. Because the distribution of elite disciples and ordinary disciples was different, their management methods were also different. Since Yizhenji lived in Xianxing Palace, the steward's hall couldn't interfere too much, and it was difficult to stop other people's mouths. Thus, Lord Daoist Xianxia waved his hand and directly indicated that Yizhenji should be recorded as Master Daoist Shoujing's disciple. Tiange originally didn't approve of this. Why should she record a child she taught herself as someone else's disciple? Especially when that person basically didn't care about him. But Lord Daoist Xianxia said that she was only in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm now. No matter how fast her cultivation was, it would still take her 50 to 60 years to form her gold core. By that time, Yizhenji should have already built his foundation. The method of distributing foundation-building pills to elite disciples and ordinary disciples was also different. Did Lord Daoist Xianxia want to drag him into building his foundation? For this reason, Tiange could only acquiesce. Now, Yizhenji still lived here and hadn't even seen his nominal master. Tiange walked to the frost jade bed and saw Yizhenji lying on the bed. She frowned slightly and helped the child up. She placed her hand on the top of his head and inserted her spiritual aura into his body. After a long time, Yizhenji groaned and woke up. When he saw her, he called out in a low voice, Auntie. Mo Tiange let go of him and said, "Aren't you going to take some medicine to heal your injuries?" Yi Zhenji's face reddened. He hurriedly took out some medicinal pills and ate them, then sat cross-legged. Mo Tiange stayed by his side, quietly observing his condition. Just now, when she was cultivating, she used her divine sense to pay attention to the outside world. Suddenly, she noticed spiritual aura fluctuations here. After careful examination, she found that the spiritual aura inside Yi Zhenji's body was in disorder and showed signs of being possessed by the devil. Just now, when she placed her hand on the top of Yi Zhenji's head, she immediately realized what was wrong. This child obviously ate several aura-converging pills. The medicinal power was too strong and he couldn't control it, so he almost suffered from the devil. Before long, the spiritual aura inside Yi Zhenji's body finally calmed down. When he opened his eyes, he saw Mo Tiange standing in front of him with a gloomy expression. He immediately lowered his head and said, "Auntie, I'm sorry." Mo Tiange regained her composure and shook her head. "Sorry for what?" "I made you worry." Mo Tiange sighed and sat next to him. "What does it matter if you made me worry? In the end, you'll be the one to bear the consequences. You didn't cultivate for me, you cultivated for yourself." "Yes," Yi Zhenji answered. He then hesitated and asked, "Auntie, don't you blame me?" "Blame you for what?" "Just now, something happened because I ate aura-converging pills. Don't you blame me for acting recklessly?" Mo Tiange smiled. "What's the use of blaming you? The most important thing is that you won't make the same mistake again. If you feel uncomfortable, you can tell me why you ate so many aura-converging pills. Don't tell me you never thought there would be problems." Yi Zhenji paused for a moment, then answered honestly, "I think my cultivation speed is too slow, so I wanted to eat more medicinal pills to speed up my cultivation." Slow cultivation? Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. "You're only 12 years old, but you're already in the 3rd layer of the aura refining realm. How could it be slow?" "But Hualing is the same age as me, and he's already in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm." Hualing was the youngest disciple of Lord Daoist Jinghe's 2nd disciple, Master Daoist Mingzhen. Because he was the same age as Yi Zhenji, he could be considered Yi Zhenji's little playmate. Mo Tiange smiled. "Hualing is your martial uncle Mingzhen's blood-related descendant. His spiritual roots are also better than yours, and he's been carefully taught since he was a child. How could he be the same as you?" Upon hearing what she said, Yi Zhenji pursed his lips and his gaze dimmed. "I know my aptitude isn't comparable to his, but if that's the case, doesn't that mean I'll never be able to catch up to him for the rest of my life?" "Of course not." Mo Tiange stroked his head. "On the path of cultivation, aptitude isn't enough. You might not be able to catch up to him now, but as long as you continue to cultivate earnestly, you'll eventually catch up. Besides, in the past 2 years, you've advanced 2 layers from the 1st layer to the 3rd layer, while Hualing barely advanced to the 5th layer a few days ago. What are you afraid of?" Seeing that Yi Zhenji lowered his head and didn't say anything, Mo Tiange knew he was still unconvinced, so she said with a smile, "Then let's do it this way. You'll spend 10 years cultivating earnestly. Let's see if you'll build your foundation first or if he'll build it first. What do you think?" Yi Zhenji thought about it. He still had a high chance of advancing to the foundation building realm within 10 years, so he smiled and said, "N. But let's make this clear, you can't do things like you did today, pulling up seedlings to help them grow. Cultivation has to be done step by step. Being too impatient won't do you any good. If you're careless and end up suffering from qi deviation, you'll have to delay your cultivation for many years. The gains won't make up for the losses." "All right, I'll listen to Auntie." On the other side, Lord Daoist Jinghe had just finished his fight. His luxurious golden dragon robe had already been burnt to ashes, and his face was also stained with a lot of unknown ash or soil. Even half of his beautiful short beard was burnt. He was in a sorry state. He flew back to Clear Spring Peak angrily. As he flew, he muttered, "Old Daoist Jinyang, I gave you face today. If I used the Great Yang technique, even if you didn't die, you'd still be half dead. I'll let you off for the sake of us being fellow disciples." The old Daoist Jinyang he spoke of was currently directing his disciples to tidy up the cave with a dark expression. He himself called his youngest disciple over and locked him in a relatively intact stone room before he started scolding him. "Brat, you're too bored, aren't you? Instead of cultivating diligently, you went to seduce that old fool Qin Jinghe's disciple? You could have fallen for anyone, but that old fool is a complete scoundrel. If the upper beam is crooked, the lower beam will be crooked. How good can his disciple be? If you behave yourself, I'll forget about this matter." Bai Yanfei was bewildered by his scolding. "Master, I told you about this." Lord Daoist Jinyang was stunned. "You told me? When did you tell me?" "Last time, when you were cultivating, I said I wanted to find someone to perform dual cultivation with, and you said I could do whatever I wanted." Thinking about it carefully, Lord Daoist Jinyang seemed to have said that. He couldn't help feeling embarrassed, but he still scolded him angrily. "I said you could do whatever you wanted, but you really did? There are many beautiful female cultivators with high cultivation levels in our sect. How did you fall for that old fool's disciple?" This time, he didn't even want to call him Qin Jinghe. He just directly called him old fool. Bai Yanfei felt even more wronged. "I said I'd choose from the several martial uncles, but you agreed. I looked around and only senior martial sister Mo was suitable, but you still didn't tell me." Lord Daoist Jinyang thought for a while, then said angrily, "Doesn't your martial uncle Miaoi also have a girl? I remember she's not that old, and she's also suitable for you. Why didn't you choose her?" Bai Yanfei cautiously looked at his master and said, "That senior martial sister Wu doesn't look too." He didn't finish his sentence, but how could Lord Daoist Jinyang not understand? Lord Daoist Jinyang glared at him. "As a cultivator, why are you so fixated on appearances? Whether they're beautiful or ugly, they're just bones under the skin. Besides, how ugly could a cultivator be? That old fool's disciple isn't that beautiful." Seeing his furious master, Bai Yanfei cleverly shut his mouth and stopped talking. Now that his master had a falling out with martial uncle Jinghe, saying anything more would only add fuel to the fire. Lord Daoist Jinyang paced around the room twice, then said, "Let's just forget about this matter. You don't need to think about this girl anymore. That old fool was prepared to give her to his boy. It's not your turn." Bai Yanfei was dumbfounded. "Master, what do you mean?" "What I mean is that girl belongs to Qin Shoujing. Do you understand now?" This news shocked Bai Yanfei, but he quickly shouted, "What does it have to do with him?" I asked, and senior martial sister Mo clearly has no intention of performing dual cultivation. "That's also none of your business." Lord Daoist Jinyang looked at his disciple and sneered. "Alright, brat, be a bit smarter. I had a falling out with that old fool, but you still went to provoke his disciple. Are you trying to humiliate me? Let's just forget about this matter. If you want to perform dual cultivation, just pick someone else." Lord Daoist Jinyang swung his sleeves, then turned around and left the stone room. Although Bai Yanfei understood his master wasn't sneering at him, he still gnashed his teeth. Chapter 143. A grayish humanoid object landed on a remote hilltop on the clear spring peak. It stealthily looked around, and after confirming that there was no one around, it went to the front of an immortal's cave. It clasped its palms together and cast a set of hand seals to open the outer restriction, then entered the stone door. As soon as he entered, he shouted, Where are you?" He walked through the stone path, entered the hall, and skillfully chose a stone door. After another set of hand seals, the stone door opened, and a handsome but gloomy face greeted him. But when this face saw him, it immediately turned into astonishment. Lord Daoist Jinghe carelessly wiped his face, causing his entire face to become even darker. Qin she couldn't help but frown and ask, "What did you do? Why did you make yourself like this?" Lord Daoist Jinghe looked down at himself, still sitting in front of him indifferently, and pointed at his nose. "It's because of you." "Because of me?" Qin she raised his eyebrows suspiciously. He absolutely didn't believe this. How could he not know what kind of moral character this master was? How many years had it been since he called his name? Every time he called him lad, lad? Now that he suddenly called his name so warmly, he must have done something ridiculous to please him. Sure enough, Lord Daoist Jinghe looked around to make sure there was no one else in his immortal's cave, then mysteriously approached him. It's because of you that I fought with old man Xianxia. Brat, what's with your expression? Lord Daoist Jinghe rolled up his sleeves. I fought for you to this extent, but you're not moved at all? Qin, she calmly said, tell me what happened first. Being dragged back to the main topic, Lord Daoist Jinghe glared at him for a long time, but in the end, he couldn't help but proudly take credit. Old man Xianxia's disciple wanted to steal your wife, so I fought with him. My wife? Qin, she asked slowly, when did I have a wife? Oh, you still won't admit it? Lord Daoist Jinghe stared at him with a, you don't have to be embarrassed, expression. Tiange, I know you don't want to tell me now, but it's okay. I won't tell anyone. I'll wait for you slowly. Before he finished speaking, he automatically stopped because Qin Shi's face was already gloomy. Master! What? Lord Daoist Jinghe wanted to stroke his beard, but in the end, his hand was covered in dust. He then patted his clothes in annoyance, causing the black dust and dirt in the entire stone room to fly everywhere. Qin Shi glared at him angrily, but he didn't know what to say. After a long time, his expression finally softened. Master, if you have nothing to do, why don't you go out and experience the world? Now that your cultivation level is high enough, you should look for fated chances to advance to the late stage. His voice was very calm, and his words sounded as if he was thinking for the other party's sake. However, everyone could tell that a storm was brewing. Upon hearing Qin Shi's tone, Lord Daoist Jinghe involuntarily shrank back, but in the next second he shouted boldly and confidently, Stinky brat, what's with your attitude? I've risked my life for you. I've even lost my image and you're talking to me like this? Qin Shi felt he was already very restrained, but when he heard what she said, he couldn't control the fire in his heart and it suddenly flared up. He couldn't help but tighten his face. Master, there should be a limit to your recklessness. Lord Daoist Jinghe obviously didn't know where the limit was. Upon hearing what Qin Shi said, he stomped his foot again. Act recklessly? You're actually saying I act recklessly? You, if it weren't for your awkward temperament, would I have to look after your wife at such an old age? Let me tell you, who told you she's my wife? Qin Shi also couldn't help but shout. You actually took this kind of non-existent matter seriously. You've lived for 800 years, but where did your brain go? Lord Daoist Jinghe had lived for 800 years, but he was still despised by a junior. God knew where his brain went, but he only knew that his self-esteem was hurt. His expression turned fierce. Stinky brat. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? You've been like this since you were a child. You obviously want to die, but you're unwilling to say it. If I don't look after you for you, you can go cry in the future. Lord Daoist Jinghe shouted fiercely like an elder, but Qin Shi didn't buy it at all. Don't take it for granted. I have nothing to do with her at all. Lord Daoist Jinghe sneered and stared at Qin Shi with a sharp gaze. If you have nothing to do with her, why did you hide your identity from her? Why didn't you see her for 2 years? Why did you cultivate so hard? I was the one who brought you up. Other people might not know about your twisted thoughts, but I know them all too well. You didn't tell her who you were because you didn't want to face her as an elder. You didn't want to see her and cultivated with all your might because your self-esteem was hurt by her deification great ancestor. You thought you've always been taking care of her, but in the blink of an eye, you're nothing but an ant in her great ancestor's eyes. You felt like you suddenly lost the qualifications to have any thoughts about her, so you cultivated like crazy. Brat, you always thought Master was unreliable, but I have to tell you, no matter what, I've lived for 800 years, you're still too inexperienced. Qin Shi didn't say anything during this long speech, but his expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He knew this master of his had always been frivolous, but what he said now made him feel as if the secrets in his heart were suddenly exposed in a defenseless situation and exposed to the sun without any shelter. He also felt as if his softest place was ruthlessly pricked by a needle. It was a dull pain, but he couldn't find the wound. After Lord Daoist Jinghe finished speaking, he took a deep breath and continued to say, "You've always been stubborn. You keep everything in your heart and think you can do everything well. But I have to tell you that this kind of thing is gone once you miss it, so it doesn't matter if you don't admit it now. I'll watch you, but don't say one thing and mean another. Master doesn't want you to regret it later." Xianxia didn't speak and just glared at Lord Daoist Jinghe in front of him, but when he heard the latter's words, his gaze subconsciously softened. He looked down and his expression was stiff. No one knew what he was thinking. After a long time, his somewhat hoarse voice was heard. "Don't think you're infallible. My diligent cultivation has nothing to do with this matter." "Nothing to do with it?" Lord Daoist Jinghe came over and smiled. "Brat, do you think I can't see something in your heart? There must be something you didn't tell me about the matter last time. It hurt your self-esteem, didn't it?" Xianxia didn't speak, but his expression changed and he clenched his fists. Seeing his expression, Lord Daoist Jinghe stepped back, sighed softly, and said in a soft voice that he had never used before, "This matter, it's all my fault for not teaching you well. You've always had a firm Dao heart since you were a child. Aside from cultivating, you didn't think about anything else. At such a young age, you were as steady as an old man. At that time, I thought you were really born to cultivate, but now I realize that's not the case. You don't get entangled in anything because you don't care, but when you do care, it'll be a disaster. Your cultivation journey is too smooth, don't stare at me. Although you've also experienced many dangerous situations, you've never experienced the tribulation of the state of mind. It's so smooth that you've never tasted the taste of failure. Although you've been taken care of by me since you were a child, you don't like to rely on me. All these years, your cultivation until the core formation realm can be said to be the result of your own efforts, and it actually has nothing to do with me. Because of this, you've always been confident and proud. Your pride makes you always ask yourself to do your best and not be affected by anything or anyone. This kind of temperament has always made you walk ahead of others, but you don't know that excessive pride can cost you your life." Xianxia lowered his eyes and didn't speak. This unreliable master of his would never say such a long speech, nor would he use such a caring and soft tone, but his words were so sharp that he couldn't say anything to refute. If you go on like this, you'll have an inner demon," he said with a long sigh. Xianxia pursed his lips and said, "I'll solve it." But Lord Daoist Jinghe just shook his head. "I know you don't want to rely on me, but there are some things that I, an old monster who has lived for 800 years, can see more clearly than you. I don't know what's bothering you, but I know that the source of everything is that girl. So, I'm seriously reminding you that if you get her, your inner demon will naturally disappear. She's not an object." Upon hearing Xianxia's somewhat stubborn tone, Lord Daoist Jinghe smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile one would have when one was old and frivolous. Instead, it carried a bit of tolerance and a bit of pampering. "I talked for so long, but you actually only emphasized this point. Brat, you're really done for." Xianxia no longer spoke. He lowered his head and didn't move. Lord Daoist Jinghe took out his handkerchief, wiped his face clean, and said slowly, "In fact, this girl is really not bad. She has a rough experience, so she knows self-respect and self-improvement. Although she hasn't grown enough right now, she'll definitely become a useful person in the future after being tempered. Apart from anything else, she's indeed suitable for you. You don't like noise, so she's very quiet. You only love to cultivate, so she also has a firm Dao heart. Most importantly, you admire her very much. It's impossible for you to fall in love with a woman all of a sudden. You can only start with admiration. The more you admire, the more you care, and the more you care, the easier it is to be moved. You've always looked down on women, but you just emphasized that she's not an object. Brat, can you deny that she's very special in your heart?" Xianxia still didn't answer, but it made Lord Daoist Jinghe even happier. "I haven't seen you so awkward in many years. Looking at you like this, I really feel a sense of accomplishment." Upon hearing this, Xianxia raised his head and shouted angrily, "Master! Lord Daoist Jinghe was very happy, so he ignored Qin Shi's expression. Don't. Other people's children have teenage worries when they're in their teens or 20s, but you only have them when you're over 100 years old. How rare. Qin Shi became even more annoyed. Although he didn't say anything, he clenched his fists as if he wanted to punch him. Of course, he wouldn't do such a disgraceful thing like beating his elder, but he didn't mind driving him out. Seeing that Qin Shi was about to lose control of his anger, Lord Daoist Jinghe wisely stopped while he was ahead. Alright, let's not talk about that. Let's just seriously discuss the feasibility of dual cultivation. Brat, you've cultivated the pure yang technique you obtained from the deification senior to the 3rd layer, right? Right now, your pure yang aura is getting stronger and stronger, and it's not much different from a pure yang body. Your art of 3 primordial cycles has obtained extreme yang aura and neutral aura, so you only lack extreme yin aura, right? Upon seeing Qin Shi nodding hesitantly, Lord Daoist Jinghe continued to speak. Let's talk about the art of 3 primordial cycles first. This cultivation technique is closely related to the distant past era. Ancient cultivators believed that the 3 primordial auras were the origin of heaven and earth. According to what you said, this cultivation method is most suitable for advancing to the next realm. However, the requirements for cultivating it are very harsh. If the 3 elemental qis cannot be formed, then there is no hope for the great Tao. Right now, you already have the extreme yang and neutral qi, but you can't find the extreme yin qi. I don't believe that you don't know that dual cultivation with a female cultivator with a pure yin body is the easiest and safest way to obtain the extreme yin qi. Qin Shi remained silent, but Lord Daoist Jinghe didn't force him to speak. He continued to say, let's talk about the pure yang art. In the past, when you accidentally obtained the yang spiritual bead, I told you that this kind of rare treasure would allow your yang energy to grow endlessly, and it might even change your physique. Now that he had obtained the pure yang secret art, this saying had come true. Now that you have a pure yang body, you will receive great benefits when you dual cultivate with a pure yin body. After that, the room fell silent. Lord Daoist Jinghe stared at Qin Shi as if waiting for him to make a decision. Qin Shi's expression was stiff, but he didn't say a word. After a long time, Qin Shi finally said, I don't want to dual cultivate for some kind of benefit, whether it's for cultivation or for my inner demon. Lord Daoist Jinghe burst into laughter. He wasn't surprised by Qin Shi's answer at all. He patted Qin Shi's shoulder helplessly. Brat, I just said too much pride will cost you your life. You'd better, so what? If I have to rely on a woman to form my nascent soul, what's the fun in that? Lord Daoist Jinghe shook his head, but he suddenly asked, then let me ask you. If it's not for cultivation or for your inner demon, do you really not want her? This time, he didn't get an answer, so he could only borrow a place to tidy himself up and return to Xianxia Palace refreshed and refreshed. He was a wise man his whole life, so how could he let his disciples and granddisciples see him with a dirty face? Fortunately, this brat didn't take any disciples and was in closed-door meditation now, so there was no one around his cave. After Lord Daoist Jinghe left for a long time, a low voice came from inside the cave. At least, after I form my nascent soul, Qin Shoujing. Bai Yanfei clenched his teeth and cast a spell with all his might. The towering old tree in front of him broke and crushed a shrub with a crashing sound. He felt a bit more comfortable, so he looked for a place to crouch down and rest. Bai Yanfei had always been very proud. He thought it was natural for him to be a bit proud. He was born in the royal family of the secular world and was the noble crown prince of Yan country. Ever since he was a child, he lived in luxury. When he was 10 years old, a master immortal came to the imperial palace. That master immortal was proficient in the art of immortals and mastered the wonderful art of wind and thunder, letting him know that immortals really existed in this world. He was very envious, so he pestered that master immortal to acknowledge him as his master. The master immortal couldn't dissuade him, so he reluctantly tested Bai Yanfei's spiritual root because he was the crown prince. Unexpectedly, he discovered that Bai Yanfei had the aptitude of a single spiritual root, which was rarely seen in 100 years. The Master Immortal was overjoyed and reported by Yanfei's matter to his own cultivation group. In fact, this Master Immortal was only a part-time disciple of Xianxia school. His master allowed him to leave the mountain, but he just wanted to return to the secular world and enjoy the glory, splendor, and wealth. Unexpectedly, his master found a genius with a single spiritual root. Because of this, he obtained enormous benefits and was accepted as an inner disciple. He was even bestowed a foundation-building pill. Later, this Master Immortal's senior personally came to Yan country and took him back to Mount Taikang. He also made him acknowledge the head Grand Supreme Elder as a disciple and personally taught him. At that time, he no longer cared about the glory, splendor, and wealth of the secular world. He abandoned the crown prince position and the envious gazes of his former imperial father and brothers to become the advanced inner disciple of Xianxia school's head Grand Supreme Elder. When he was a mortal, he was the crown prince of a country. When he was a cultivator, he was the proud disciple of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. How could he not be proud when he achieved what he did? Sure enough, with his excellent aptitude, his path of cultivation was also very smooth. Advancing to the next realm and building his foundation were extremely difficult and dangerous for others, but they were extremely easy for him. However, there were still times when he wasn't happy. For example, whenever the female cultivators in the school talked about the male disciples, they would first say, "Martial Uncle Shoujing," or "Senior Martial Brother Shoujing" first. He was very unconvinced. What was so great about Qin Shoujing? Building his foundation at 20 and forming his gold core at 78? Lord Daoist Jinghe's direct disciple? Handsome? Speaking of appearance, he had seen Senior Martial Brother Shoujing's appearance, and he was just SOSO. He thought he was handsome and charming, not losing to anyone else at all. Speaking of identity, he was Lord Daoist Jinyang's last disciple. Was Qin Shoujing worse than him? Lord Daoist Jinyang was also a late-stage nascent soul great cultivator. His cultivation level and identity were even higher than Lord Daoist Jinghe's. Speaking of cultivation level, wasn't it because Qin Shoujing was older than him? Speaking of aptitude, Qin Shoujing was nothing but a person with double spiritual roots, far inferior to him. In conclusion, Qin Shoujing was only born more than 100 years earlier than him. If he had more than 100 years, Qin Shoujing wouldn't even be qualified to carry his shoes for him. Of course, he was just casually thinking about these things before. Mentioning Qin Shoujing just made him unhappy. But now, he was gnashing his teeth, wishing he could blast Qin Shoujing away with a spell just like that tree. In fact, it wasn't that he couldn't be with that senior martial sister Mo. He just felt that a young, promising, talented, and handsome young hero like him couldn't have a beauty as his companion. Senior martial sister Mo's identity was good, her cultivation level was also good, her appearance was also considered good, and she was about the same age as him. Most importantly, she had a gentle temperament. She wasn't as boring as senior martial sister Wu of Blue Phoenix Peak or as unruly as junior martial sister Jiang of Drifting Cloud Peak. She was also capable of handling affairs, so she definitely wouldn't have a problem taking care of her husband and raising their children. But he never expected that when he finally found someone pleasing to his eyes, that guy, Qin Shoujing, would unexpectedly poke his nose in. What was Qin Shoujing? A guy who couldn't compare to him in anything. It was precisely because he was more than 100 years older than him that his cultivation level was higher than his. No, he couldn't be outdone by Qin Shoujing. It was fine if it was other people, but how could he let Qin Shoujing snatch senior martial sister Mo away from him? That would be too humiliating. Since he already harbored malicious intentions towards senior martial sister Mo, he must win her heart and let that guy, Qin Shoujing, know that he, by Yanfei, was the #1 young hero in Xianxia school. With that thought in mind, Bai Yanfei squatted on a tree stump and started laughing mischievously. Chapter 144. As a result, Emogu realized she didn't know what her master did with the matter she entrusted to Lord Daoist Jinghe. Not only did junior martial brother Bai not behave, but he even became more aggressive. When she cultivated every day, she would definitely receive a summoning talisman. The content was something along the lines of, "Senior Martial Sister, today's weather is good. Let's go out and meet up." As soon as she went out, Junior Martial Brother Bai would immediately appear in front of her. In the end, even Yi Zhenji was affected. He said a martial uncle Bai fawned on him so much that he ran away in fear. Mo Tiange was furious. She rushed to Lord Daoist Jinghe's main hall and shouted, "Master!" Lord Daoist Jinghe was so frightened by her sudden appearance that he threw away 2 grapes. When he regained his senses, he glared at her. "What are you doing? Why are you making such a big fuss?" Mo Tiange already knew what kind of person her master was, so she wasn't scared at all. Not only did she not shake him off, but she also complained, "How did you do things? Junior Martial Brother Bai is pestering me even more tightly now. He's so annoying." Lord Daoist Jinghe was surprised. "What about him?" "He sends me summoning talismans every day and even runs to Zhenji's side to fawn on me. He really scared Zhenji." "Oh." Lord Daoist Jinghe swallowed a grape and nodded thoughtfully. "This brat isn't stupid after all. He actually knows how to fawn on the people around you." "Master." Mo Tiange became even more annoyed at his reaction. "Whose side are you speaking for?" Lord Daoist Jinghe hastily corrected himself. "I said he's too stupid. He actually harassed the people around you. Now that you're angry, what else is there to talk about? That's not the point, okay?" Mo Tiange held her forehead. "Who's the master and who's the disciple? Why do I always get half killed by this master's nonsense? Then what's the point?" Lord Daoist Jinghe was baffled. "The point is, how did you do things?" Speaking of this, Lord Daoist Jinghe said, "Girl, master fought with old man Xianyang for you. Not only are you not moved at all, but you also talk to master like this?" "Fought?" Mo Tiange was baffled. "Master, why did you fight with martial uncle Xianyang?" "Because that old Daoist looks down on you." Lord Daoist Jinghe said boldly, "You're my disciple. Looking down on you means looking down on me. If I don't hit him, who else should I hit?" Mo Tiange felt she didn't need to say anything. She should have known that if things were handed over to this master, it would definitely turn into a fight in the end. Now that the fight was over, it was no wonder that the other party did not listen to him at all. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was baptized by Mo Tiange's murderous gaze, was unhappy. "Child, why don't you know how to respect your master?" Mo Tiange ignored his words. She stroked her chest and swallowed her anger. She then said calmly, "All right, master, you can continue eating grapes and putting on airs. I'll deal with it myself." She turned around and walked out of the main hall. Behind her, Lord Daoist Jinghe's noisy voice rang out. "Child, how can you talk to your master like that? What do you mean by putting on airs? Don't go." Mo Tiange walked out of Xianxia Palace and sent a summoning talisman. The reason why she didn't want to settle it herself was because she wanted to keep a low profile and didn't want to stir up trouble. But now, it seemed that she couldn't count on anyone else. It was better for her to do it herself. Besides, so what if she offended that junior martial brother Bai? At most, she would offend that martial uncle Xianyang. In any case, her master already had a falling out with him. She didn't have to wait long outside Xianxia Palace before she heard a cheerful voice. "Senior Martial Sister Mo." Mo Tiange took a look. This junior martial brother Bai came really fast. Junior martial brother Bai. She forced a smile. Bai Yanfei's eyes were full of spring and his face was full of smiles. After he decided to pursue this senior martial sister Mo, he consulted several senior martial brothers with dual cultivation partners and several senior martial sisters, but they all said different things and no one could convince the other. In the end, there was only one thing that no one objected to. A chaste woman was afraid of a pestering man. Bai Yanfei thought about it. He really didn't know how to use other methods, but this one was simple. He just needed to pester her directly. Therefore, he sent a summoning talisman every day and inquired about her whereabouts. In the end, someone suggested he start with senior martial sister Mo's little nephew. He thought senior martial sister Mo only had this one blood relative, so she must value him very much. Sure enough, senior martial sister Mo replied to his summoning talisman and was willing to meet him. Senior martial sister Mo, by Yanfei beamed with joy. I've been waiting for a long time. You're finally free. Mo Tiange looked left and right, then said with a calm expression, Junior martial brother Bai, I have something to tell you. Come with me. Bai Yanfei nodded hurriedly. There were many people in the vicinity. It would be bad if others heard them. It would indeed be bad if others heard them. Although Mo Tiange was already prepared to offend people, she didn't intend to make them lose face. That would be making enemies for no reason. After circling around in the sky, Missouri Tiange finally saw a completely empty mountaintop, so she took the lead and landed. Senior martial sister Mo, this is... Bai Yanfei originally thought they were going to find a beautiful place to talk about their worries, but he never expected they'd find a bare mountaintop without even a place to sit. However, his eyes shifted. There was no one here. Could it be that she wanted to? Before he could finish his thought, he heard Mo Tiange's voice. Junior martial brother Bai, I think we should talk about some things. Bai Yanfei regained his composure. He rubbed his nose and obediently answered, Senior martial sister, please speak. Mo Tiange glanced at him, then looked into the distance. Her voice was indifferent as she said, I understand junior martial brother's kindness, but ever since I embarked on the path of immortality, I've been wholeheartedly focused on Dao and didn't intend to get involved in matters of love, so I can only let you down. With junior martial brother's talent, presumably, your future is bright. When you succeed in your Dao, you'll naturally find a beautiful woman to marry you. Why do you need to settle for an ordinary woman like me? Junior martial brother, please don't disturb me in the future. I'm not as talented as junior martial brother. If my Dao heart isn't firm, I'm afraid I won't be able to accomplish anything. After she finished speaking, Mo Tiange glanced at him again. However, when she saw Bai Yanfei's bewildered expression, she couldn't help but frown. Junior martial brother Bai? Bai Yanfei was startled. Junior martial brother, did you hear what I said just now? Bai Yanfei scratched his head as if he still didn't understand. I've finished speaking. I'll take my leave first. Just as she was about to turn around and slip away, Bai Yanfei suddenly shouted from behind her, Senior martial sister Mo. Mo Tiange felt helpless. She stopped and turned around. Junior martial brother Bai, do you have anything else to say? Bai Yanfei was dumbfounded for a moment before he said, Senior martial sister, are you rejecting me? Mo Tiange naturally wouldn't say it so bluntly. She smiled and said, It's me who's not worthy of junior martial brother Bai. But I don't mind. Bai Yanfei shouted, I know senior martial sister Mo isn't a peerless beauty and your aptitude is also average, but I think you're quite suitable, so I won't be picky. Could it be that he couldn't tell she was just being polite? But I mind. After rejecting a person she didn't like, Mo Tiange also became angry when the person said in a condescending tone, I don't mind that you're not worthy of me. Her voice turned cold. I mind very much. Bai Yanfei still didn't understand why she was angry. With an innocent expression, he said, I don't mind. Why do you still mind? Mo Tiange tried to restrain herself, but in the end, she still couldn't hold back. Junior martial brother Bai, even if your cultivation level is the highest in the world and you're incomparably handsome, there will still be people who don't like you. I don't want everyone to like me, that's why I'm the one who doesn't like you, Mo Tiange interrupted him and said bluntly. Some people didn't understand even if she gave him face, so she might as well tell the truth. Huh. Such a straightforward answer made Bai Yanfei finally silent. Mo Tiange saw his face turning green and white, so she thought it was better to be tactful and not turn hostile. Junior martial brother Bai, I'm wholeheartedly devoted to Dao, so I really don't want to get involved in this kind of love matter. You're very good, there's naturally a good girl who likes you, but I don't have such thoughts, so let's end this matter here. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, another voice came from behind her. Senior martial sister Mo. Mo Tiange felt powerless. Junior martial brother, is there anything else? The corners of Bai Yanfei's mouth twitched, but in the end he still said, is it because of Qin Shoujing? You rejected me because of Qin Shoujing, right? Mo Tiange said expressionlessly, who said that? Martial Uncle Jing has said that Qin Shoujing brought you back because he wanted to use you. Mo Tiange didn't say anything, but her expression had already explained her mood. You misunderstood, right? I didn't misunderstand. This was what Martial Uncle Jing has said. Bai Yanfei sneered. What's so good about Qin Shoujing? Which part of me is inferior to him? In terms of aptitude and identity, how can he compare to me? He was only born 100 years earlier than me. Give me another 100 years, and I'll definitely trample him under my feet. Mo Tiange also sneered. Junior martial brother Bai, do you know where you're standing right now? Whatever you do in Morning Sun Peak is fine, but this is Clear Spring Peak. It's not a place for you to throw a tantrum like a young master. Bai Yanfei was startled by such rude words. Senior martial sister Mo Tiange continued to sneer. On Clear Spring Peak in front of me, you spoke ill of my senior martial brother. Junior martial brother Bai, could it be that martial uncle Xianxia never taught you manners? Bai Yanfei's face turned blue. Mo Tiange took a step forward. I said some polite words to you, but you don't understand, so I can only tell you the truth. Junior martial brother Bai, do you think you're amazing? If it weren't for martial uncle Xianxia, what would you be? Single spiritual root? That's right, your aptitude is very good, but if we just look at aptitude, what's the point of us cultivating? We'll just rank you according to your aptitude. Yes, senior martial brother Shoujing is more than 100 years older than you, but even if you're given 100 years, can you do the same as him? I'll say it bluntly again. Are you sure you can form your gold core by yourself in 100 years? Of course I can. Bai Yanfei's face turned red. It was unclear whether he was angry or embarrassed. I have a single spiritual root. Even if I don't have a master, I can still do it. You're actually comparing me with Qin Shoujing. It's you who wants to compare yourself with senior martial brother Shoujing. Mo Tiange raised the corners of her mouth and stared at him. It's fine if you don't want to compare yourself with him, but why don't you compare yourself with me? I'm not a genius with a single spiritual root, but I'm already 29 years old and in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. What about you? Genius junior martial brother Bai, you're only a few years younger than me. Why did you just build your foundation? That's because you had a fated chance. Bai Yanfei shouted, trembling with anger. Do you think I don't know? You encountered a fated chance right after you built your foundation, so you directly advanced to the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Yes, but fated chances are also strength. Mo Tiange continued to smile. So what if we're comparing the aura refining realm to the foundation building realm? Junior martial brother Bai, you built your foundation at 22 years old, senior martial brother Shoujing built his foundation at 20, and senior martial brother Lingxi of Sweet Du Peak built his foundation at 17, you still couldn't beat them. Let's talk about me. I built my foundation at 23 years old. At that time, I was still a waste with 5 spiritual roots, and I was only 1 year slower than you. Did you really beat all of us? Bai Yanfei couldn't say anything. He only saw Mo Tiange looking at him as if she was looking at an ignorant child. Cultivate diligently. If you only put your mind on dual cultivation, 100 years later, you'll really be unworthy of the title, genius with a single spiritual root. Senior martial sister Mo. Bai Yanfei once again chased after her. It was unclear whether it was because he was unwilling or because he was angry. But this time, Mo Tiange didn't stop. With a wave of her sleeve, a surge of spiritual aura blocked his path, so Bai Yanfei could only watch helplessly as she stepped onto the white silk handkerchief and swaggered away. Bai Yanfei stood in the same spot. His heart was filled with resentment and embarrassment. It really never crossed his mind that this senior martial sister Mo would actually look down on him. But just now, senior martial sister Mo easily blocked his path with a single move, letting him know that he really wasn't as good as her. No, of course it wasn't like that. He angrily cast a spell, blasting a big hole in the ground. He was a genius with a single spiritual root, and he was Lord Daoist Zhenyang's last disciple. How could he be inferior to others? They were just lucky. The bare cliff suddenly slid open, startling Bai Yanfei back to his senses. As soon as he turned his head, he saw a person standing in front of the open stone door. That person was looking at him with an indifferent gaze. Junior Martial Brother Bai, you came to our Clear Spring Peak as a guest. Why did you smash a hole in my Immortal's cave? Bai Yanfei stared blankly at the person in front of him, unable to regain his composure for a while. But soon, when he clearly saw who it was, he jumped up in anger. Qin Shoujing, it's all because of you. I'll fight you. Bai Yanfei unreasonably took out the magic weapon his master bestowed upon him and angrily rushed forward. It never occurred to him that he wouldn't be able to defeat Qin Shoujing with his current cultivation level. Qin Shi simply raised his hand, and a spiritual pressure immediately enveloped him. Bai Yanfei's spiritual aura stagnated, and he couldn't move even an inch. He was unwilling to accept this and desperately tried to mobilize his spiritual aura to resist, but this spiritual pressure was too strong. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Qin Shi withdrew his spiritual aura and said faintly, Junior Martial Brother Bai, don't blame me for teaching you a lesson on behalf of Martial Uncle Xianxia. Bai Yanfei lay on the ground, unable to say anything. It was unclear whether it was because he was beaten or because he was angry. After thinking about it, he was overwhelmed with sorrow, so he simply burst into tears. Why was his life so bitter? He had just been rejected, and now he was being taught a lesson by his rival in love. Moreover, it was in this kind of position, he really lost all his face. Qin Shi was dumbfounded when he started crying. Although he usually didn't show his emotions, he still couldn't help but feel like he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had only met this junior martial brother Bai many years ago. Although he had grown up now, his temperament was still that of a child. After crying for a long time, Bai Yanfei wiped his face and stood up while sobbing. His face was covered in tears and snot. Coupled with the blood he spat out just now, his whole face was smeared with blood. In an instant, he no longer had the demeanor of a handsome young master and looked like a dirty cat. Just as he was about to stand up, pat his clothes, tidy his hair, and go back in a fresh and clean manner, he saw Qin Shi right after he stood up. He became angry again. Why are you still here? Qin Shi said expressionlessly, this is my Immortal's cave. Of course I'm here. Bai Yanfei suddenly felt so ashamed and resentful that he wanted to die when he thought about how he was treated as a joke. He fiercely glared at Qin Shi. However, Qin Shi turned a blind eye to his glare. He said calmly and indifferently, Junior Martial Brother Bai, if there's nothing else, you should hurry back to Morning Sun Peak. I won't keep you here. But who wants to stay? But Qin Shi didn't wait for him to speak. He turned around and entered his Immortal's cave. The stone door was closed and the illusory formation was opened. Bai Yanfei was left standing alone in a daze. The wind blew through his dirty cat face, making him look extremely sad. Emo Tiange angrily opened the restriction on Mingxin residents. Yi Zhenji and his little friend Hualing were playing with the inferno beast, Xiaohua, in the courtyard. When the two little guys saw her coming in with a cold expression, they immediately stood up. Auntie! Martial uncle! Seeing their scared expressions, Emo Tiange hastily squeezed out a smile. Oh, it's Hualing. What are you two playing? No, nothing. Yi Zhenji hurriedly said, Auntie, we're not playing with Xiaohua. We're playing with Xiaohua. This time, Emo Tiange really burst out laughing. Xiaohua was currently a spiritual beast equivalent to the early stage of the foundation building realm. It was also docile, so it became the target of these two little guys. They always wanted Xiaohua to help them with this and that, thinking she didn't know. In fact, how could she not know? It was just that they restrained themselves, so she just let them be. Besides, with Xiaohua by their side, she wasn't afraid of any accidents happening to them. All right, you two can play. Emo Tiange stroked Yi Zhenji's head and let the two little guys play by themselves. She then went into the cultivation room. Inside the virtual sky world, there was still a cool breeze and clear water. Xianxia sat in the small room for a while, trying to calm her chaotic mood. She picked up a stack of books, but after staring at them in a daze for a while, she suddenly threw all the books out. These books made of different materials fell on the bamboo planks, making a messy sound. She panted heavily, sat down dejectedly, and buried her face in the crook of her arms. Martial Uncle Jing has said Qin Shoujing brought you back because he wanted to use you. Martial Uncle Jing has said Qin Shoujing brought you back because he wanted to use you. Bai Yanfei's words kept coming back and forth in her mind, refusing to stop. Although she was so sure and played it down at that time, she couldn't control the anger in her heart. In fact, she knew those words must have been said by Lord Daoist Jinghe. No matter what, Bai Yanfei wouldn't make things up. However, she didn't know what the original words were or what they meant. She couldn't help but guess, did they really have such a plan? With the virtual sky world, she wasn't afraid of other people harboring evil intentions towards her, but she didn't want that person to really harbor evil intentions. Chapter 145. Xianxia later heard that out of anger, Lord Daoist Jinyang took junior martial brother by back and grounded him. He then disappeared without a trace. Even when she went to Morning Sun Peak to run errands, she never saw junior martial brother Bai again. Her days also returned to normal. When she gradually integrated into the school and gained a reputation among the aura-refining disciples, Lord Daoist Jinghe agreed that she no longer needed to go to Mingxue Hall every day. She only needed to go to the steward's hall to give sermons every once in a while. In addition, the affairs of Shangqing Palace were still handed over to the maids, but she was still responsible for them. If there were any mistakes, they could ask her. Just like that, Xianxia unconsciously realized that her status in Xianqing school had risen. Not to mention the low-level disciples calling her grandmaster, even the foundation-building disciples calling her martial uncle was more sincere. As a result, she swallowed back the words she heard from Bai Yanfei some time ago. No matter what kind of thoughts they had towards her in the beginning, she saw how well Lord Daoist Jinghe treated her now. If he really treated her as a human furnace that could be used, why did he put in so much effort? If they didn't mention it, she would just pretend she never heard it. 1 year after another, time flew by. Although she had the virtual sky world, Xianxia's cultivation level didn't rise too fast. First, she deliberately slowed down the pace of her cultivation to lay a good foundation so that her unstable mental state wouldn't affect her core formation in the future. Second, although there were many spiritual plants in the virtual sky world, they were all high-level spiritual plants. She was only in the foundation-building realm now, so she couldn't use many of them. 3 years had passed. Xianxia was now 32 years old, but she still maintained the appearance of an 18 or 19-year-old. There were many reasons for this. First, her art of Sunu, now called Sunu Art of the Origin, had the effect of retaining her youth. Second, she took a look-preserving pill, so unless she encountered some special circumstances, she wouldn't age in this life. Even without these two reasons, she was now a foundation-building cultivator. With the lifespan of 300 to 400 years, she was still young. Yizhenji, on the other hand, had grown up. He was now a 15-year-old teenager, but his figure grew taller. His face gradually grew longer, and even his voice became coarse. Xianxia wasn't tall, but he had already caught up to her. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before she looked up at him. Nevertheless, Yizhenji's attitude toward her had never changed. He still trusted and admired her and regarded her as a respected elder. As for that master in name, he simply couldn't remember him. Yizhenji's cultivation level rose very quickly. Xianxia generously used all the medicinal pills and treasures she could use in the aura-refining realm on him. Right now, his cultivation level was already in the 7th layer of the aura-refining realm, completely catching up to Hualing. Under Xianxia's influence, this child also cultivated very hard. His temperament and perception were both excellent. In time, he would definitely have some achievements. The people of the Yi clan had been keeping in touch with him and would send things over every once in a while. They didn't know about Mo Tiange's existence. They only knew that Yi Zhenji was accepted as a disciple by a core formation cultivator. They were very happy, so they also sent a lot of offerings. These things were nominally given to Master Daoist Shoujing, but in fact, they were all delivered to Mo Tienge. Seeing those offerings, which were priceless in the secular world, Mo Tienge and Yi clan members were living very well in the secular world, so she felt relieved. Although she didn't have any feelings for Yi clan, it was, after all, her clan and second uncle entrusted it to her. If it was within her ability, she ought to do her part. When the 3rd year passed, another great piece of good news came from Xianxia School. Master Daoist Xianyin successfully advanced into the nascent soul realm. He was now Lord Daoist Xianyin. After learning about this, Mo Tienge conveyed her congratulations to Lord Daoist Xianyin and changed the way she addressed him. From now on, she had to call him Martial Uncle Xianyin. Luo Fengxue and the others were also her peers. Once they advanced into the nascent soul realm, they would be a great master. Although they still had the master-disciple relationship, it could be considered they had established their own school. Xianxia School had a total of 6 peaks. Each of the 5 nascent soul cultivators occupied 1 peak. Now that the 6th nascent soul cultivator had appeared, the empty peak was assigned to Lord Daoist Xian. From then on, Lord Daoist Xianyin and his disciples all moved to Sweet Dew Peak. For the sake of Lord Daoist Xuanyin's advancement, Lord Daoist Jing has specially looked for Mo Tienge to educate her. Lord Daoist Xuanyin's aptitude was excellent. He was one of the disciples with a single spiritual root that Xianxia School would only accept once every several hundred years. However, he never fought for the title of genius. He only cultivated step by step, laying a solid foundation step by step. Now, he was already more than 400 years old when he tried to form his nascent soul, so he could succeed on his first try. This matter was just right to educate Mo Tienge. She obtained the art of the origin, got rid of the reputation of having a waste spiritual root, and her aptitude could also be called a genius. Lord Daoist Jinghe knew her cultivation was too fast, so he specially reminded her that no matter how good her aptitude was, she could only achieve twice the result with half the effort if she had a solid foundation. Mo Tienge understood his meaning. She was also aware of this problem. Building her foundation at the age of 23 was considered early, but she also directly advanced from the early stage to the middle stage. If she sold some of the spiritual plants in her virtual sky world, she could have continued taking spirit-gathering pills and reached the late stage of the foundation-building realm in 10 to 20 years. However, using medicinal pills to advance her cultivation level had a huge hidden danger. If her mental state couldn't keep up with her cultivation level, problems would arise when she made a realm breakthrough. Lord Daoist Jinghe was very pleased that she understood his meaning, but he muttered, "It'd be good if that stinky brat could also understand." Lord Daoist Xuanyin's advancement into the nascent soul realm not only greatly affected Xianxia School, but it also affected the structure of the great cultivation groups in the celestial pole. The demonic beast riot not long ago was now officially over. Because Xianxia School issued a mountain sealing order early, although they lost many foundation-building disciples and several core formation cultivators, the aura refining disciples weren't affected. Many disciples with high aptitudes were also well protected. Presumably, in 50 to 60 years, Xianxia School would return to its former heyday. As for the other 6 great cultivation groups, Danding School no longer had the strength to be one of the 7 great cultivation groups. It would take at least several hundred years for them to recover their strength. Although powerful cultivation groups like Tiandao sect also managed to preserve their most important disciples, their losses were much greater than Xianxia School's because of their early underestimation. The other sect that didn't suffer much was Zhengfa School, which was located in the northernmost glacial zone. It had now been renamed Zhengfa sect. They only had one branch in Kunwu, so although they suffered losses, it didn't affect them too much. However, the conditions in the northernmost glacial zone were harsh. Although Zhengfa sect dominated the north, it couldn't develop to the scale of Tiandao sect or Xianxia School. Otherwise, they wouldn't have established a branch in Kunwu. The reason why Xianxia school always ranked below Tiandao sect was because its nascent soul cultivators were inferior to Tiandao sect. Tiandao sect had 7 nascent soul cultivators while Xianxia school only had 5. In terms of other disciples, the difference between the two groups wasn't big. Now, Lord Daoist Xianxia advanced into the nascent soul realm, increasing the number of nascent soul cultivators in Xianxia school to 6. Although Lord Daoist Lingshu was likely to pass away within 100 years, Master Daoist Shoujing had successfully advanced into the late stage of the core formation realm. With his temperament, it wouldn't be a problem for him to add another nascent soul cultivator to Xianxia school within 100 years. There was also Master Daoist Lingxi, a genius with a single spiritual root. He was now in the middle stage of the core formation realm and might advance in 100 years. At that time, the number of nascent soul cultivators in Xianxia school would increase to 7. Moreover, almost all of them would be in the prime of their lives. In addition, Lord Daoist Jinyang had just turned 1,000 years old. With his cultivation level in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, it was very possible for him to live for another 7 or 800 years. Lord Daoist Jinghe was more than 800 years old and was now in the peak of the middle stage. As long as he had a fated chance, he could advance to the late stage. Knowledgeable people could almost imagine how prosperous Xianxia school would be in the next several hundred years. On the other hand, although Tiandao sect had 7 nascent soul cultivators, 3 of them were nearing the end of their lives and would pass away within the next 200 or 300 years. Among the core formation cultivators, they couldn't compare to Xianxia school in terms of talent. Therefore, when Lord Daoist Xianxia advanced into the nascent soul realm, Xianxia school sent invitations to many cultivation groups that were on good terms with them. The cultivation groups that received the invitations all pondered what kind of gifts they should send to befriend Xianxia school. Among them, the Grand Supreme Elders of Tiandao sect had mixed feelings. This indicated that the title of the number 1 cultivation group in the celestial pole would very likely change hands. Regardless of what other people thought, the nascent soul ceremony Xianxia school prepared for Lord Daoist Xianxia was bustling with noise and excitement. Mo Tiange had a headache. Many guests came to Xianxia school for this nascent soul ceremony. Ordinary guests could be received by aura-refining disciples, but those guests with status and background had to be received by elite disciples like them. Because of this, Mo Tiange secretly cursed that senior martial brother Shoujing, who claimed to be in closed-door meditation. Why did he say that it didn't matter to him, but she had to put aside her cultivation and be busy everywhere? But in any case, this was Lord Daoist Jinghe's idea, so she had to obediently obey. Although she didn't show much respect to this master on the surface, there was a trace of respect in her heart. The reason she could have her current status and didn't make any mistakes on the path of cultivation was all thanks to this master. Fellow Daoists, welcome to Mount Taikang. I'm Mo Tiange, Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple. I've been ordered to come and welcome you. This time, cultivators from medium-sized cultivation groups came to the mountain. Their cultivation levels weren't high nor low. Core formation cultivators were already received by their senior martial brothers and sisters with similar cultivation levels, so she received the disciples brought by these people. After all, with her identity, it wouldn't be considered rude even if she came alone. Sure enough, when these 7 or 8 foundation building cultivators heard her identity, they all looked surprised but soon returned the greeting with envy in their eyes. One of them was very quick-witted and immediately said, "I'm Wei Shida, a disciple of Mount Bailing. Greetings to Martial Uncle Mo." Mo Tiange hurriedly smiled and said, "Senior martial brother, you don't have to be so polite. Our cultivation levels are similar, so you can just call me senior martial brother and junior martial sister." "How can I do that?" The man smiled flatteringly. "Martial uncle is Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple. This is too disrespectful to Lord Daoist Jinghe. Senior martial brother, you're too polite." Mo Tiange smiled, not showing the slightest bit of complacency. Xianxia school disciples call each other martial uncle because we're afraid it'll mess up the seniority. Senior martial brother isn't a Xianxia school disciple, so you don't have to do this. My cultivation levels are similar to yours, so we can just treat each other as peers. I see. The man was about to say something when a cold thumph came from the crowd. Soon after, someone said in a strange tone, "Senior Marshal Brother Wei, why are you in such a hurry to make friends with them? Why don't you take a look at your own identity? You'll make people laugh their heads off if this gets out." Wei Shirta's expression immediately changed when he heard this. He turned around and glared at one of the young men. "Dong Dafeng, I won't lower myself to the same level as someone who doesn't understand manners like you." That young man sneered and said, "Do you not lower yourself to the same level as me, or are you afraid of being laughed at by this junior martial sister from Xianxia school?" "You." Seeing that the two of them were about to fight, Emotienga hastily said, "Senior Martial Brothers." No matter what, she was still the host, so the moment the two of them heard her calling out, they immediately stopped talking and turned around. Emotienga smiled and said, "Senior Martial Brothers came to Xianxia school to congratulate us, so why don't you give Martial Uncle Xianin some face and let this matter end here? What do you think?" Since she mentioned Lord Daoist Xianin, the two of them had no choice but to stop bickering. They both cupped their hands towards her and said, "Junior Martial Sister is right." Wei Shirta probably saw that the young man called her junior martial sister so smoothly, so he also changed the way he addressed her, not wanting the young man to take advantage of him. Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Everyone just arrived at Mount Taikong, so you must be tired. How about I arrange for everyone to rest?" These people naturally didn't have any objections. Soon after, the aura-refining disciples led the way while she followed behind them and helped these cultivators settle in the guest residences. Just as she finished arranging everything and was about to leave, a cultivator followed her out of the small courtyard. Emotienga walked for a while before she suddenly stopped and shouted, "Who's there?" With the shuttle of flying Apsara and the white silk handkerchief in her hands, she sensed something was wrong and was ready to fight. Unexpectedly, she was stunned when she turned around. The cultivator behind her was also in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He was dressed in black clothes and had a very tall stature. He was more than a head taller than her. "Junior Martial Brother Yi?" That person said hesitantly, "Are you Junior Martial Brother Yi?" In just a moment, Emotienga regained her composure and smiled. "Senior Martial Brother Lu, long time no see." This person was Lu Yidao, one of the few acquaintances she had left in Yunwu sect. Upon hearing her answer, Lu Yidao revealed a smile but stopped halfway. The corners of his eyes were half moist. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, you're alive. You're really alive. This is great." His excitement was beyond Emotienga's expectations. Ever since she left Yunwu sect, she hadn't thought about the past for a long time. At that time, it could be said that she was fleeing for her life. She simply didn't dare to bid farewell to those people. Moreover, the people she cared about at that time either had families and clans like Murong Yen or had foreseeable futures like Lu Yidao, so she didn't need to worry about anything. Now that she saw Lu Yidao had become a foundation-building cultivator and came to congratulate her on behalf of the sect, he must have been doing well. Emotienga was very happy, but she also felt calm because it was within her expectations. After a while, Lu Yidao regained his composure. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, please don't take offense. I ran into an old friend today and forgot myself. Senior Martial Brother Lu is happy for me. How could I take offense?" Emotienga was happy to see Lu Yidao's expression, but she also felt strange. "Senior Martial Brother Lu, how did you see me?" Lu Yidao smiled and said, "I was arranged to live there." He pointed at the guest house not far from them. "When I saw you just now, I thought my eyes must have been playing tricks on me. How could there be two people who look so similar, but their clothes are completely different? They're too similar, so I couldn't help but come here to verify it. Fortunately, I came and asked. It really was you. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.